There we go. Hello,
Hey.
hello. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. If you can see
Morning?
Well,
Excuse me, I'm in the UK. We're deep into afternoon.
everyone
Hell,
knows the UK
I'm
is a
already willing to...
psyop. It's not real.
Well, this psyop is disappointed with your claim of morning.
There we go. I meant to click that. Hope everyone's doing good this morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be in the world. Pretty excited for today's stream, as it's going to be it's the last of our little bonus streams. 2 a.m. here. Where the hell is here?
I mean, are you on the other side of the world to me? I presume you must be. So you're probably talking, what, Australia, somewhere around there? Holy heck. Partly there's no audio over on YouTube. Is that the case? You remember how I said the other time? Remember how I said the other time that this never happens?
Yeah, I don't. Somehow I can't. No, I don't believe them. I think they're fucking with us.
They must be. I mean, everyone would be saying that they can't hear. I can hear. Yeah, nice try. You got me going there.
Has for a second. It was like that can't be. That can't be, because if it is, I just can't.
So today's as Sotek was saying, is our last bonus stream that we decided to do after the craziness of the chaos streams, where everybody dropped so much cash in our direction. Again, thank you so much. That we decided we just do some fun bonus streams on top of our normal repertoire. And I'm particularly looking forward to this one because it's a classic. It's one of the ones that, if any of you out there know Graham Davis, who's one of the earliest Warhammer writers, would never do. And there's a reason he'd never do it. It's because Graham doesn't like being exposed to other people's ideas lest they say, that's my idea. He likes just doing his own thing, where I kind of don't care. If an idea is cool and it's Games Workshop's property, then really... if I end up writing that thing, then it's Games Workshop, not me, that deals with all of that, so who cares? No, but truth be told, if I ever wrote anything, it would be my version every single time, so there'd never really be a lift on anything. I'm particularly looking forward to this one, though, because it's one of those topics where sometimes people will stray into ideas that I've never considered, and we'll go, oh, nice idea. I'm imagining, as is often the case with crazy headcanons, which is what our topic of the day is, that our crazy headcanons, a lot of them are going to be, I like that. Not what I do, but I like it. Because that's often where we end up land with these things. But there might be a few, oh, Alexa's decided, fuck off, Alexa. So I need to get it out of my office. I have no idea why I haven't done it yet.
Headcanon too.
Maybe she does. Okay, fair enough. Maybe she threw super chats in our direction. So that being the case, we have a lot to go through because there's clearly going to be super chats coming in and we'd like to go through those, but we'd also like to go through as many of just the general chats that are popping up as well, because this is a bonus stream. It's not just for people who throw money in our direction. So we're going to try and go through these relatively quickly. If an idea really makes us go, yeah, we might not be able to help ourselves dwelling on it a bit. So apologies ahead of time if that should occur. Our goal, however, is to go through them relatively swiftly. Have a look at an idea, talk it out that he's talked out, move on to the next one. Because for all that we know, we're going to be going for 3 hours. 3 hours is actually a really short amount of time when you're discussing more than, say, 10, 50, 20, 30, maybe even 50, 60 ideas. That's only a minute or two per idea. So we have to go quickly. So that being the case, be aware if you've got your coolest headcanon, we may not spend a lot of time on it because we have a lot of headcanons to go through. If you want us to actually respond to one of the many posts that are coming in, make sure you mark the front of your post with either at us at Lorebeards or at headcanon to make sure that we can actually spot it, because there's going to be all hosts of comments coming in and we don't want to be bringing them all up as we try to find what it is that you're telling us. Beyond that, we also have not exactly a surprise. I mean, we did discuss it last stream, but it's still nonetheless a bit of a surprise.
Oh, yes. The Discord is officially live. Officially. I am posting the link right now. So, if you want to join the new Lorebeards Discord server. It is now alive and available for anyone to come in and post. There's an onboarding system, so you should be able to see the things that you want to see. You may notice some sections that you go, what's that about? And we will explain absolutely nothing.
I have literally no idea what you're talking about. All the sections make absolute sense. There's nothing there that might make anybody go, what? Having said that, there is a few things that are worth noting for those of you who are jumping in for the very first time into our Discord. Number one, not everything is set up. We are in progress. This is a work in progress. So you'll find that it will be changing over the course of the next so many weeks as we decide exactly what is the most useful way of communicating with everyone. Beyond that, we're also using relatively heavily the forum systems for people who want to talk about individual topics. So make sure you check which forums are there, use them. Be aware that we've not set them up fully yet. So use them, and then on top of that, we may change them. So be aware that they are in a state of flux also. But beyond that, jump in, go wild, see what you find. Our Discord is now open.
Yep. All right. With that, also, we'll be holding a poll over the next week or so where we're going to figure out what the hell you guys are called.
Yeah, at the moment you might notice that there is an entire section at the bottom of Discord called Beardies. And that's not because we want to call you all Beardies. It's just because Beardies was a short and easy term to use as a placeholder while we were deciding what to call the community as a whole. And we decided we didn't want to decide what to call the community as a whole. And it would be much better if you decide what to call the community as a whole. So feel free to drop posts, give ideas, maybe even start a forum about that down in Beardies Forum, and have a discussion as to who you think, well, what you think, pardon me, would be the best name to use.
I like how I immediately have gotten an alert from Automod screaming, unusual activity detected!
What? There's so many people joining, there must be something wrong. The Automod immediately goes, ban everyone!
All right, you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready to get started. Let's see how this goes.
All right, Magladroth front-loaded this shit, so let's get into it. Magladroth says, Nagash became a god in Nagashazar, but rejected becoming an etheric entity. He is now a horrible physical god. Sigmar learned from the Crown of Nagash how to do this and became a proper etheric god.
So this isn't that much of a stretch in terms of headcanons. Nagashazar is where he effectively has become a physical god, and there are various attempts to bring this into the lore. If we take a look at the Thousand Thrones campaign, it's sort of hinted at in that for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, and the equivalence between Nagash and, say, for example, Myrmidia, who may have ascended, and indeed Sigmar, who ascended, is sort of drawn, and it's drawn even further if you go into some of the extra material that was produced by some of the writers for that, particularly Jude Hornburg. Sigmar learned from the Crown how to do this and became a proper etheric god. Again, not a great stretch. As headcanons go, this fits pretty well.
Yeah, I would say this lines up really easily. One of the big theories about, one of the big mysteries is how exactly Sigmar became a god. It's one of those things that, you know, people in the universe are just like, oh, he just walked off and became one. But if you actually sit down for the brass tacks, it's a big mystery. But for a lot of people, the point of him putting on the crown, allowing him to ascend to godhood, is not that crazy of a theory. It's one of the stronger ones that might have been a pivotal point. Though it also does open some fun potential avenues for like other characters that have worn the crown and what maybe actually happened to them and other stuff like that. But yeah, I don't think that's that crazy at all.
Yep, I think that's great. Next.
Magladroth, the Great Beast, is the first Chaos God. It revolted first, was sealed away / defeated by all the other gods, and all the other Chaos Gods simply followed in his footsteps and usurped its throne.
So, interesting idea. This goes against canon, which is always nice when we're coming up with crazy theories. The canon is the 4 Chaos Gods plus others were the first. And the Great Beast is potentially a part of that conglomerate or comes afterwards. So this is repitching the background and saying the Great Beast goes first and the others come after. It's I would suggest only a good headcanon to deploy if you build a really good story for it. What makes the beast go instead of the others? And in my own personal headcanons, the story of the 4 core Chaos Gods plus all the others makes more sense if all of them are involved, because they all bring different things to the party. And they all make a revolt against what is effectively reality, and effectively going, we're going to destroy reality, a much more likely outcome. So this one here currently lacks the story to make it a good substantive theory, I think.
Yeah, and I'm going to be throwing out criticisms like crazy this stream, but please know it's not me thinking your ideas are bad. I'm just doing my best to respond to hot takes as we're moving along here.
We've got to be quick, so we can't do our normal cushioning where we go, please don't be upset, but we're about to tear you a new one.
I will say, I think this one pivots very close. I think having a singular thing that becomes the antagonist and kicks off chaos swims a little close to like kind of the typical Christian narrative for my liking, where you have kind of like a devil figure, which I think is better avoided in most cases. And this kind of says that to me. Like Andy said, I think there's a way you could build around it, but it would take a lot of work.
Yeah, you could, but yeah, nah, this isn't one for me.
Maglajaw, 40k and fantasy both witness the war in heaven from different angles / times, etc. That's why the Eldar believe their gods are dead when they might not be. 40k is just stuck with the chaos side of things.
Sure. There's not a lot to say about this because the very nature of the theory is that it's skewed and squint. It's not attempting to say one is working in parallel with the other and thus we have to build a theory to make it all work. This is very much we are seeing it through a lens darkly, and so thus it's differently perceived on both sides. So as a headcanon goes, you can literally just say sure, because there's little else that could be added to that. This would work. I would prefer personally, though, to tackle it from a different direction because I'm a little bit more methodical in how I make everything work together.
Yeah, I don't think I would consider this like core canon and fantasy by any extent, but I think if your goal was to build that 40k and fantasy share a universe, or they have a shared universe and you're wanting to build that up very, very heavily, this would definitely be a core question you have to answer, which is why are there 2 wars in heavens and how do they relate to each other? Because they should. Because they both, they're both. So I think for a particular version of the universe you're building, this would be fundamental. And I like this idea. I like it a lot because that would even allow, like, you have entities that are being viewed through weird lenses, which then could allow you to further extrapolate how there are fundamental things that are shared between the settings, but they're just seen differently because of like the looking glass that is the realm of chaos, which could be fun. Maglajaw, chaos wants to destroy the world because they fear death, unlike other gods. For example, Khorne rages against his own end after being sentenced to death by Shurin, who executed him, though, is unknown.
So, as theories go, this one is surprisingly sound. It might surprise many out there, but if we take a look at the gods and the ones who rebel, we've got a god of fate in that mix. Tzeentch, who can see all time and how it ends, and time is actually wrapped up in the material world. Time is not a core component of how the aether works. So bringing time into existence means that the concept of death has been built, and the concept of death would terrify things that are potentially immortal and cannot be killed. Now they can be ended. They can be brought to a close. And we know this is the case because various entities in the Warhammer world are killed properly. Proper etheric entities that should be effectively immortal are brought to an end. Azurin, the great creator of all this stuff, if you go with the Elven lore, I bring it up because you brought it up, apparently supports this as a potential outcome. And Khorne, all of them, almost certainly wouldn't. So this, as crazy theories go, not that crazy when you take a look at what the aether is and what the material realm represents.
Yeah, I personally like this a lot because it would give a better justification to why chaos is trying to destroy reality as opposed to just like coveting it. Is that it's a threat, and it also would make chaos be a little bit more of not overly, but like slightly more organized in why they're motivated to do the things they do. When you have, like, if the Chaos Gods are what they are, it would make sense that they would at least have an inkling of what the great plan is if you were running with the idea that GW has put out, that the great plan is to kill them. And if you're a unstoppable, immortal timeless entity, and all of a sudden you realize that there's a way you can be killed. You're probably going to obsess over that a lot.
Yeah, totally. It makes absolute sense within the fantasy setting.
Next up,
not so crazy.
Battledraw, thank you again. Lastly, lizardmen are basically the Covenant from Halo. Both have vanished gods, understand their tech badly, are a collection of species led by floating prophets, and both have a great plan/journey.
Sure.
I want to disagree, but I'm not seeing many flaws in this particular presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Battledraw. Really appreciate it.
Sure. I expect fan art on my desk by 5. Thank you. Also, just want to grab this out. For those of you going to the No Kings protest today, be safe out there. We support you really desperately. Do be careful out there, though. Things are a little spooky.
Yeah, be careful. It's crazy.
Let's see. Bobblefoot. The shed Loremaster of Sotek has been working on is stuffed with Lorebeards merch. Also, to all No Kings marchers, stay safe, stay alert, and watch out for each other. Definitely, those are all true things. Yep.
I really wish we had Lorebeards merch. It will come eventually. It has not yet.
Yeah, because we'll have to figure out how the fuck that works, which is out of my normal pool of.
That's all right. I'm already slowly but surely working on a variety of stuff because I'm going to be doing the same for over on LAWhammer. Once I do one, it'll be very easy to transfer all of that over into everything that we're building for Lorebeards. And Lorebeards is going to have all of its own stuff, effectively, that we can merch if you wish to be one of the people who are on the receiving end of buying cool shit. So we will have that up eventually, but not yet.
Yeah, and in a perfect world, if we're able to do it from our relative locations, we'll be able to there'll be an American side and a European side to make it not horrifically expensive. You don't happen to live in one of those places.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Drazina, Urson is the former husband of the widow Kislev. Attacked or cursed, Urson was on his deathbed when his wife Kislev, a beautiful young mage, sacrificed her beauty to save him.
Interesting concept, Drazina. So first, Urson, former husband of the widow, that immediately makes you go, well, that means Urson's dead. After all, the word widow suggests that. And Urson isn't dead, at least in the way that we understand gods to be alive or dead. Urson is still an extant deity, but it is also worth noting that Urson worship and Urson reverence sort of died out in Kislev. It came to a loose end and then was brought back to the forth by Tsar Radiboka. So you could very easily build a story where Urson died into it, and it would be a seamless addition with the potential return of Urson through the processes that are at hand in Kislev. So could you make this work? Yes. The young beautiful mage part I think is much less likely in terms of how it works. The ancient widow or Kislev or whatever you want to call the entity that lies behind much of what happens in that frozen landscape probably, in fact almost certainly, isn't mortal. It called to the Gospodars from across the Chaos Plains and pulled down what was a Chaos tribe to it and brought them in, and effectively they worship it. So the entity that is much less likely to be mortal.
Yeah, I could see this if you run with this narrative, which could actually work really well, of that Urson is like mortally wounded by Chaos during the Great War against Chaos, and then there's some big thing that happened leading up to Radiboka in the last like 50 years of the timeline that brings him back.
Yeah, that's cool.
That would work really well. And this could be a useful like in-universe story from like the Ungol perspective of like the hags telling a story about how it was Mother Kislev that brought Urson back, but she had to do some horrible, terrible sacrifice in order to do it. And it's like, that's why Kislev is perhaps more vulnerable in some way, in order to bring Urson back from death and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, you could work this, especially because the 200-year gap between the Great War against Chaos and the like the modernish era is really, really like not very well detailed for Kislev.
It's terribly detailed, particularly for Kislev.
So for like Urson worship to die off and for them to recover over those 150 years, they would have gone through a lot. And that being reflected in their religion and like the stories they tell about their faith should be present.
Yeah.
So I like this.
And while we're between them, a couple of points. If you've come in a little bit later, if you want us to review your crazy theory, make sure you at Lorebeards or at Loremaster of Sotek, depending on which channel you're on, or alternatively say at Crazy Theory or some equivalent, or we will skip it by. If it doesn't have an at towards us, we are just going to scroll by as we go through all the comments. We are intending on not just doing super chats, but any chat that comes in, super chats we'll obviously definitely attend to, because thanks very much, you all rock.
In fact, fuck it, I'm going to grab this one.
Well, there we go.
Hey,
but we have others to do too.
The Skaven were specifically driven to use meteors on the Lizardmen, the end times, because they specifically knew if the Lizardmen were still in the fight, Chaos would have lost.
I don't think they care if Chaos won or lost.
Yeah, I would say that I think this goes against the Skaven's nature of being the ultimate little c Chaos faction, and they are literally too stupid to consider the consequences of their actions. Because
I think, I agree
entirely. The meteors destroyed them too, and a lot of the world.
Skaven.
Like Clan Pestilence died.
Fucking
full on. So I see where you're going with this, but I think it's too conniving. I think it's too successful of a scheme for the Skaven to have deliberately done it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Saint Box, the only true winners of the end times were Archaon, the Great Horned Rat. The Big Four didn't get any power boost from the world exploding, and a corruptive apocalypse turning the world into chaos waste makes more sense, as they feed off material cycles, which don't exist after Kaboom. Archaon, the anti-theist, got his fuck you gods by blowing it up, and the Great Horned Rat, the god of ruin, ascended from the ruin of the world.
I think, broadly speaking, I disagree. Chaos is not tied through to a single world. If we go with the standard narrative, the Warhammer world and all of the other dimensions across everywhere else is much bigger than just simply 4 Chaos Gods caring about the reality that sits here. The reality that sits here is really important. The old ones are doing something here, and it appears to be, at heart, the destruction of the Chaos Gods everywhere. But Archaon didn't necessarily benefit in any real way beyond. He then off to destroy a bunch of other realities, as he went hopping around through other realities until eventually he comes into the Age of Sigmar timeline, where he's said to have been around for fucking ages, doing everything that, for example, in 40k, they've never managed to succeed to do. In many respects, Archaon looks over at all the Chaos Space Marines and their attempts over in 40k and basically laughs at them and says, I've destroyed multiple realities. You can't even do one, you big bunch of losers. So he did do relatively well, but he's still nonetheless tied to Chaos. Those Chaos Gods are utterly happy with what they've done, presumably because they've brought the end times to pass. They have stopped the great plan of the old ones, but as it turns out, they hadn't, meaning that the war continues on.
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with your statement that there were much more tangible, like, rewards for the Great Horned Rat and Archaon. Like, they definitely got the most out of it.
I mean, eventually.
Yeah, but it took time. And they also, like, it wasn't that the Big Four got, like, weaker or stagnant. It's just that they're already so mighty that whatever is successful increases of power they did get are indiscernible.
Yeah, effectively, it consolidates their win. We've won. We can go rampage into any reality we want and eat it. Woo! We're happy! Woo! But as it turns out, the Warhammer world hadn't been quite as destroyed as they all thought.
Korenshima, there are 6 other Rhea continents besides Lustria, but they were all sunk during the Cataclysm, just like Lord of the Rings during Morgoth's time. That would be a very easy thing to say, because there's no way anyone could counter it, really.
Completely. And indeed, Corrine, I'm going to go further and say that your statement here, disregarding the 6 in particular, or the naming of the continents, is almost certainly true. The Cataclysm and also the moving of the world by the old ones completely reshaped everything. Completely. So the idea that there is sunken areas and other parts of the world that have not been touched effectively by mortal hands in the way that we understand them, except for maybe fishmen, absolutely is the case. So I don't think this is so crazy at all.
Yeah, I think this would make perfect sense, and it would do a really good job of demonstrating the horrors of the old ones and the horrors of the Cataclysm simultaneously. Captain Magma, the Horned Rat is fragments of the Big Four that broke off during the God War and the Cataclysm and manifested into its own being during the Doom of Kazmar. Hence why the Horned Rat has aspects of the Big Four gods within him.
Yeah, you could do that. There is nothing saying that this sort of thing can't happen. Indeed, shearing off of different parts of the great chaos powers is something that happens frequently as various minor entities sit in the periphery of the great maelstroms that are the core great chaos gods. This is not exactly a controversial thing to say. However, pulling in bits of all of those chaos gods to create a fourth one is a stretch, but not a stretch that's possibly too far. Could you do this? Yes. Could you make a cool story out of this? Yes. Is it what I do? No. I much prefer the Horned Rat to be a much more unique entity.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff you could do here, and you could tie this in really easily to like a bunch of other theories as well. This could simply be like a minor aspect of him, because I mean, you could have him as the great inheritor, being that he literally inherits certain aspects of the other gods. That they've perhaps discarded or lost over time as they became like more pigeonholed in a sense, because their own nature drives them to become more and more extreme. Where you have like Nurgle abandons forms of pestilence that lead to an end because he wants to be an eternal cycle. So aspects of himself that cause true death and entropy he discarded, and maybe that gets inherited by the Great Horned Rat and stuff like that, and you play within that sort of angle. That could definitely work. It's complex, and like Andy said, I wouldn't make it the only thing that led to his creation, but it could be a aspect.
Yeah,
though it also would be very funny to imagine he's just like this fun little fat rat god that just like runs around whenever the gods throw a piece of them they don't want, he just grabs and eats it like a piece of cheese. That is a very funny mental image for me.
And appropriate. Thematically on point.
Yep. Dalaman, pre-old one world is described as mostly covered in ice with a tropical band in the middle. In my opinion, there would also be a temperate band as a transitional area. These lands could have been a large swamp focused from the point where the ice sheets melt. This leads to part two of my theory. The ice swamps would have been the original home of the Famir. I see no reason to disagree with that.
Yep, that seems fine. Nothing there that's particularly controversial. Go.
Sean Schultz, what does Andy think of the latest DLC trailer?
I am personally avoiding it because I'm still thinking of watching it.
And he's going to do it on a stream so people can enjoy his reaction and tip him and ask questions.
I mean, if you all want me to do it, I suppose I'll do it. I've been avoiding it because I'm lazy. But yeah, I've avoided the trailer as well, though, so I still could do it and get a first actual reaction rather than, fake. Oh, I've definitely not watched this. Ooh.
So if one of y'all would be so kind as to go into the Warhammer Fantasy forums area on the Lorebeards channel and create a new thread saying, Andy, here's all the people that think you should watch this live on stream, and I'll post in there, that'd be great. World 777. For me, fantasy and 40k are the same universe. Only fantasy happened a long time ago in some galaxy far, far away. If we say it's the same universe, where would you put the fantasy planet?
This is a classic question that has been asked by more people than you might be. I mean, you might be surprised how many people have asked this one. The most common answer is inside the Eye of Terror. It's by far. Sometimes some people go for the Maelstrom, but most say in the Eye of Terror inside 40k. And that gives a sensible and realistic potential answer. It does work. It speaks to what happened to the Warhammer world when chaos floods across it and causes all sorts of terror and nightmares there. And you can even tie it into the official timeline to a degree, because it was almost 10,000 years ago that everything went tits up. Eye of Terror forms around where the Elder fell, and that's pretty much 10,000 years ago where the Cataclysm goes. So there's a certain amount of tie over there if you wish to do it. Now, make it in a galaxy far, far away, then the very answer is made itself. You're now in Andromeda, for example. We're no longer in the Milky Way. You've sort of answered your own question. But if you want to make it as part of the 40k milieu in general, I would probably say the Eye of Terror is your best bet.
Yeah, if you want to make it super controversial, you could make it where it wasn't actually like the Eldar that caused the Eye of Terror to happen. It was the fantasy world being lost, and that was just how bad the feedback aspect was.
Yeah, I'm actually on this one just because it is a crazy theory one. I will drop a crazy theory about this somewhere later in the stream, just so you can see how crazy you can go with this shit.
Yep. Let's see. I'm just gonna grab a random one real fast. Men like Pegasus. Greenskins, fully united, can take on the entire Warhammer world, create enough Wah energy to manifest their gods and destroy/invade the realms of chaos.
So that is one that on paper looks good. But that's almost a little bit like saying, greenskins aren't greenskins. The greenskins of the Warhammer world are not like the greenskins that we get in 40k. The greenskins in 40k would do this. Absolutely would do this. A great warlord would eventually arise out from all of them, and all of them would band up behind them. But in Warhammer Fantasy, they appear to be much more disrupted and much more kept down. So the answer for this one is that will not be how it works in the Warhammer world. So it just doesn't do that. We have to make a new theory, which is sort of what you're doing. And if you're doing that, what you're saying is the greenskins in Warhammer take on more traits of 40k.
Yeah, which you could absolutely do, and I don't think it's that 100% controversial.
Could do. It's not controversial. Yeah, there's something in the Warhammer world that keeps the greenskins down.
Yep. Next one. Boop. Donovan. When parts of Ulthuan sink, yes, I'm still on this. They're still attached to the floating continental shelf of Ulthuan. They only sink a little bit rather than breaking off and sinking entirely to the sea floor. My reasoning is that Tor Enrock is still somewhat visible, so it can't have sank that far. So either it's still attached below the waves, or Ulthuan is only like 100 meters above the sea. I would say the first one is definitely the more likely. That parts of it sunk but got like grabbed or hit something from, because Ulthuan's not just like a sheer donut. It's more craggy and complex underneath.
Yeah.
So it either hit a lower part or some of the magic, it sank a bit, but then the magic kind of caught it.
The best way to draw an analogy here is think of icebergs. And depending upon their composition, icebergs can have a very small amount visible above the surface. Sometimes icebergs are below the surface because for one reason or another, what's held inside them are heavier than the water they're in, and they just kind of float along underneath the water. There's nothing meaning that it has to be anchored onto something on the ground for an underwater island to still be there. Plus magic, it can do anything. You can have bits of it underwater, bits of it above water, not a problem. But I do think that what you suggested there is not particularly controversial.
Dumbo. Dwarves are highly sensitive to touch, should also extend to their taste. Explains why manly booze is so yucky, and for tasting gases, etc. when you're underground. I guess you could do smell too. Yes.
Yeah, I think that differentiating the different species of Warhammer is a core component of making them work. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're highly sensitive to taste, but you could say they taste different things.
Yeah,
this
that's
is
what I was
really, really common in the real world. We all have different taste receptors, different species that is, that activate and don't activate under certain circumstances. Humanity activates on a whole host of things that other animals don't. And simply changing it for dwarves works perfectly. It means that, for example, they could eat foods that we find disgusting, and they're like, yeah, this tastes great, because their taste receptors don't kick off in it. And the same should be the case for elves, halflings, et al.
Yeah, just like you have the whole thing of like birds can't taste spicy stuff, right? They don't have the receptors that go off for that. For dwarfs seem to eat a lot of things that we would find horrifically disgusting. And they also tend to prefer things that have really, really powerful flavors, which I think would suggest that dwarves
they're weaker sense of taste.
Yeah, they would have a more muted sense of taste.
But perhaps they've got a sharper sense of taste in other areas. They sense things that we don't. And given that things like salt and the equivalent are minerals, tying their sense of taste through to metal and mineral also makes more sense. So doing things with their sense of taste is where I go, Dumbo.
Cadillac Monkey, I want the different settings more interconnected, especially through chaos. The fall of the Eldar leading to Slaanesh across 40k and fantasy, Age of Sigmar, Horned Rat being the cause for Skaven in 40k now, etc.
Yes, except for one thing. Age of Sigmar is so far after the Warhammer Fantasy that it's almost ridiculous. To the point that I would suggest if you're going with a relatively consistent timeline for both the fantasy side and the 40k side, then the Skaven are never arriving, ever. Because it happens later, much later. Age of Sigmar is so far time-wise past the Warhammer Fantasy world that it's never happening if we run with a concurrent 40k world. Now, if you want to go with time is weird in the ether, suddenly you can do whatever you wish. But I would suggest if you're wanting to add interconnectedness to them, that would also suggest interconnectedness of their timelines to a degree, and it makes doing the Skaven part very hard.
Yeah, I will say you'll probably have although this isn't necessarily the route a lot of people naturally want to go, you will have such an easier time allowing for the Age of Sigmar universe to be crossing into the 40k universe,
Yeah.
and allowing that to be how things like intermix and coexist rather than using fantasy, which is going to be a much more restrictive.
Yeah, fit quite well. Agreed.
Yeah. Be'lakor, or Sarmillion. Be'lakor was a gnome and underappreciated strategist. Man, he figured it out. He figured it out.
You done it, Sarmelian. That's all of our secrets are out. Yeah, Be'lakor could be almost anything. A gnome is certainly a choice. It's not one I would choose. Underappreciated strategist, I do agree with. Be'lakor is, I think, one of the lesser well-used characters because of how awesome he clearly is and how awesome he's written. But whenever they then deploy him, he comes off like an absolute ass.
Yeah, I mean, me and Andy have talked about on Lorebeards before how Be'lakor often gets too much shit because at the end of the day, every single one of his plans is like 95 to 80% successful. Like, he virtually always is extremely successful up until the very last beat of whatever his plan is. And the reason he can never be successful at the last beat is because if he was, the world is basically like doomed. Like, it's over, it's game over. But it doesn't invalidate the like other 80% of shit that he did up until that point that drags the world much closer to ruin. Like, he's consistently like a very successful big bad. Peter Osborne. Scavor is a descendant of Hashut, who was all about woodcraft and organic survival craft. Sins of the father saw him outcast. Alone then, he crafts the Skaven, seeing a chance to help the dwarves during the cataclysm. He
does something else.
He does something else.
We've lost it. He
what?
He just
he what?
around. Who knows what? The core of the idea here, however, is fine. I'm sure. I am less convinced that having Skaver fashion the Skaven effectively be the Horned Rat works, because the Horned Rat is so far away from anything that's even close to being dwarf. And it would be a really weird outcome to say, you know, the Horned Rat, he's not a rat, he's actually a dwarf ancestor god. You'd just be left going, what? It undermines the Skaven. It makes the Skaven feel less unique and interesting to say they're basically just dwarfs and humans all mixed up and broken. So I'm less convinced this is the best answer. It's not what I would prefer to choose, but I do think involving this somehow does work well.
If I were going to take this, I would spin it instead to be something like Scavor became isolated and alone because of whatever, and while he was isolated and alone, the Horned Rat devours him. Because he was abandoned by his kin.
Isolated, alone, Hashut doing his own thing, abandoned by his kin. Scavor falls, and that's horrible, and much closer to what the Horned Rat is like.
Yeah. Though I do see a similar one I'm going to grab out real quick. Michael, no, it's not Michael. It's Mihal. That's right. Solomon says, Hashut killed Gazul. The first High King wanted to kill Scavor for the crime of making Skaven. Gazul protected his son. Hashut became the first kinslayer, creating the taboo, and was exiled for it.
I think that Hashut having a story is a great idea. Hashut being the one who gets exiled. Who does that? Who exiles effectively the High King? No one. So I think that doesn't quite land as a story. Well, because if we do that, we then say that all the other dwarf gods effectively turn to what? War? Dwarves killing each other? It doesn't quite land thematically for the dwarves.
Yeah, for this one, I would kind of lean back to what we were talking about for the other one, is you could have it where Hashut exiles Scavor, and that leads to a terrible tragedy that does not reflect well onto all the dwarves because they functionally abandoned him.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something in that. And potentially part of the process of breaking Hashut and making him what he eventually becomes.
Loremaster of Sotek, I got a hot theory. An old one snatched up a temple city and hid it away between intergalactic space and turned the dial past 11, and oops, Tyranids.
Yeah, so Tyranids are an interesting component because you can easily make, and I can't believe I'm taking this seriously, but you can easily make a very strong case that they're just an old one creation, in that they are designed to wipe out all sentience in the 40k universe and thus depower the Chaos Gods. Because the Chaos Gods work, particularly in 40k, from sentience, from, well, sapience would be a better way of putting it, from active minds influencing the warp. And if you wipe that out, then the Chaos Gods are equally tamed. So you could argue that the Tyranids are nothing more than the great viral exterminator of the Chaos Gods by doing that. So not as crazy an outcome as it looks.
Yeah, my genuine personal headcanon about the Tyranids is that after the old ones lost the war in heaven, everything went tits up. One of them retreated outside of the galaxy and basically created a virus designed to reset the Milky Way back to
hilariously,
like a ground setting.
Literally the plot of one of my previous 40k games.
Yeah,
there's a dwarf galaxy that sits just outside of our galaxy. There's a dwarf galaxy. That's where I put the old one lab that made the Tyranids. I have done this story.
Grim Isaac, following my silly Wednesday question, my crackhead canon is that the elves are like seahorses, where the female is when a female is impregnated, they plant the eggs in the males.
Sure, you want to do that with your elves, go for it. I have got crazy versions of the elves, which I'm currently halfway through writing a post about just now, where they are different. They're not this sort of different, but they're definitely different. And I think doing anything to make each of the species different in your game is a good, worthwhile use of your time.
All I'll say is, have you ever seen Games Workshop or Black Library take on a pregnant elf? No, neither have I. So, like, this could be the case. Maybe that's why they're scared to write about it. Man Like Peck says, hot take. Dwarves are objectively the most powerful warriors in the setting. Obscene martial feats against warriors / catastrophes that would otherwise defeat other warriors / empires.
Yeah, that's a hot take. Disagree deeply, but that's a hot take.
Yeah, I would say there is strong evidence that leans against this. However, they do punch much higher than their stature would suggest.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they are exceedingly capable, but we have quite clearly the strongest mortals in the world in the rules, multiple places, and they are almost always, and this is always going to shock, but they're almost always human. Every single last time. Look at your Chaos Warrior Lords. They're just fucking awful. They're top tier stats on everything, and they kick Dwarf Lords in. They're horrendous. Yes, you go, what? But they're empowered by chaos. Yeah, dwarves are empowered by runes, whatever. They're all got their own things, but loosely speaking, when we're talking about our man-sized individuals, it's the humans that win the batch, and that always surprises, because most people go, well, elves are better and dwarves are better, and no, they're not. Humans rule the roost. They are surprisingly capable. Your basic humans, absolutely bollocks in comparison. But yeah. I mean, truly shit. But when they come top tier, they're the most mutable and the most likely to come out with the most ridiculously powerful idiots.
Captain Magma, the Ever-Chosens are the great beast, and Archaea is the only one who achieved godhood and be fully realized as of AOS. The Ever-Chosens are like the manifestation of the great beast. You could run with that. Be'lakor, either intentionally or unintentionally fathering the great beast, is not that bizarre of a concept. I mean, it's a little bizarre, but it's not that bizarre. That being said, Archaon has not yet achieved godhood. He's trying to achieve godhood, so you could make this work. You would have to heavily develop the mythos of the great beast from like a prophetic angle. And like how it ties into what the Ever-Chosens are as like the great destroyers of realities, but it's not a complete. It feels a little bit like square peg round hole, but if you put enough effort, you can fit it.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of describing it. It's a square peg, it's a round hole. But if we just turn that brick round, we can just slide it in regardless of the shapes that we have in front of us. We could definitely, with a little bit of twisting and turning, turn this into something, but it would need some twisting and turning and development to turn into something good.
That guy, Hatchet, being called the Father of Darkness, created and lost control of the Dark Gods, divine reflection of the Chaos Dwarfs losing the Black Orcs. That's a hot take.
I think that's a super hot take. The idea that there is an entity that's responsible for creating the gods is within setting, because Azurin is given that goal. If we look at the Elven side, Azurin is the divine creator of all mortal realms and is responsible for the entire Elven pantheon existing in some fashion or another. So Azurin sort of fulfills this role already. So if you wanted to do it, a hot take would probably be Azurin created the Chaos Gods and fucked up. That wouldn't be that hot. This one's a much hotter take, and it suggests that the dwarf ancestor gods are much more etheric and are creating etheric entities. They're part of the process of building the world and building the etheric entities that lie outside, which would suggest that Azurin was instead made by Hashut, which would be an interesting route that you could take. Could that story go? Absolutely could. There's the lore around this area is so weak, you can write almost anything and it doesn't contradict. So you could do this. It's not a route I'd take, but I think this could definitely land.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something to like Hashut did something he wasn't supposed to and tried to create etheric entities and made something horrible because he didn't understand with what he was working. There's something there. I don't think I'd put it on all of the 4 Chaos Gods,
I
but
wouldn't
like
put it on the Chaos Gods, particularly because of the way how it lands at the end with where Hashut sits and where they sit.
Now, could you do this for like a minor Chaos God? That's awful. Oh yeah, this would be super fun actually.
Yeah,
I actually really like that. Mornington Crescent, Gelt's death in fantasy is why we no longer have metal models. The age of metal is over. The age of plastic has begun.
Yeah, I would very much like to make that a part of the canon. Make that a thing.
Little did we all realize that Warhammer Fantasy controls the manufacturing process at GW headquarters.
I mean, it's those sort of stupid little jokes that if you can squeeze it in, really land well, because nobody notices them if you write them well. That sort of thing. I think I'd love to run with Morning.
You could actually fit in a very cheeky thing about that.
Yeah, it'd be cheeky, it'd be silly, but it'd be fun.
Stephen Lucas, the Amazons' own origin myths claims they are from Verdra. 5 planets and no sci-fi medieval pulp stories. We probably only get a lore expansion in Age of Sigmar.
So basically, we've got a lack of sci-fi in Warhammer. You're saying, and the Amazons could bridge that. Yes, Vedra is definitely something that could be used for that. Vedra, you could almost use it in a John Carter of Mars style idea. If you don't know John Carter of Mars, there was a Disney movie which was surprisingly good for all it completely flopped because Disney went, marketing? Who needs marketing? And the concept of that being, hey, I'm on Earth, poof, I'm in a completely different world, and it's all sci-fi and weird. Here I am, and by the way, I inspired much of what you think about of pulp fantasy and science fiction, like Star Wars. And poof, we're back in the real world again. And you could easily do that with Warhammer. Poof, we're now over in Vedra, doing crazy Vedra adventures, and then poof, we're back again. It's super easy to do that.
This could actually work in a really interesting way if you wanted to run with the idea that, like, on Vedra, there's no males. Like, it's the planet is like where the Amazons really come from, and you have this idea that the Warhammer, if you're hear me out on this, if you're running with the idea that on the Warhammer Fantasy planet there are so many different races and cultures that have all this stuff about men shouldn't use magic, men shouldn't use magic, men shouldn't use magic, and if you want to tie that into there's a reason, and that there's like, if you wanted to build like an old one story of that there's a planet where they only had females, and then someone came over to the Warhammer Fantasy planet, they created males, and shit started to hit the fan. Because there was something inherently odd about like this new thing the old ones created. You could run with that. It would be really weird, but you could run with that, I think.
Absolutely.
Brock 6000, Hawkland long rifles are so good because they have secret dwarf runes, which is why no engineers can reproduce them. They were created by dwarfs in the Middle Mountains and stolen, which if uncovered would cause war between the dwarfs and Empire.
That's one way of answering what is clearly one of the most ridiculous situations that we have in the Warhammer world, which is that Hawkland long rifles, which are different to standard Imperial weaponry because they have rifling, which makes them much more accurate. They are proper rifling, and the skilled manufacturing of rifling up in Hawkland that's been passed on down through the generations is significantly better than you find anywhere else. It's bullshit. All it takes is one relatively competent gunsmith to look at how a Hawkland long rifle works. Now everyone has them. Yeah, it's literal bullshit.
The idea that there's a guy out there who built a fully functioning, competent clockwork horse that works And he looks at a rifle and gun. He's like, I can't figure it out.
It's too complicated. There's clearly a story there. This is one way of doing it. It's not the route I would take, because you're now conflating. You're just giving dwarves access to yet more Empire shit, and it's better that the Empire works on its own merits. I would want to build a story for Hochland, not build a story for the dwarves.
Yep, I agree. I would let humanity have the W on that one.
Yep, me too.
Surrogate. That being said, if you want to tie it into like something that had to do with like the ruins of the dwarfs in the Middle Mountains, there's something you could absolutely do there.
I don't think I'd use runes, but I'm totally cool with them learning it from the dwarfs.
Yeah. Surrogate guy. I've always felt that AOS factions could have fitted in an alternate post-end times old world. The fire dwarfs being the dwarves of Karak Zorn, Lumineth being elf remnants of Elithis, Stormcast being the army of Sigmar returned. I always felt that AOS would have been much better received at the setting state of the planet. They could have done this. I
wish they had.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound weird. In a really stupid, convoluted way, it is kind of what they did. But they did it in a way where they did like a quadruple sideways backflip and didn't really stick the landing. And then they kind of just figured it out and tried to salvage it. Because when you read first edition, what it literally tells you is that the Warhammer Fantasy blew up and all of the magic and everything from the world that was scatters into the universe and then starts to recoalesce into a new form. And that's what AOS is, but they they added a bunch of steps they didn't need to add. Which is, it just is what it is, unfortunately. I agree.
Yeah, totally.
Amadeus Carcosa, Sinether is Elenil after he went mad. Morgur is him forcing himself through reality through the first soul he finds every time, making a forced avatar. Through him, he mindlessly prowls for the last 5 Elenili that survived by hiding in the mortal world. Bad news, it has now gotten the scent of their mother, Isha.
So I'm not pretty sure that Isha isn't their Elenil's mother.
No, he means the mother of Elenil's children.
Okay, gotcha. Then sure. I think this is almost a great idea, actually, as an idea. There's a potential story that could come from this, but ultimately, as we have the elven gods, regardless of what the obvious story is, that they are just gods across the entire setting, they're generally handled like elven gods by Games Workshop. That being the case, if they were to tell this story, they would tell it with an elf, not with the beastman. It's how the Games Workshop would typically handle it. Do I think, though, that this could be made to work? I absolutely do. It, in many respects, also speaks to the other 95 fucking gods that have apparently been eaten. That would make sense.
I will say this would work well in a couple different ways. Like if you're painting Elenil as like a Kronos figure where he's literally devouring his children intentionally is the way to deal with them. That works well. And I think if you wanted to run with the idea that the way Elenil forces his way past Assuran's decree fucks him up and like mutates him into this horror, and that's like that's the punishment of trying to force your way through Assuran's decree, and shows that he's not successful and it's driven him completely mad. You could do that. I don't think it would be that horrible of a stretch.
I think that this is not that much of a stretch. As much as it might look like a stretch, I think this is a story that you could definitely tell. And if a writer came along afterwards and said, this is the story, anyone that looked on it wouldn't say, well, that's bullshit. They'd probably go, oh, cool.
Yeah.
That works quite well.
Madeline Peck says, Headcanon, dwarves are physically, well, oh my god, dwarves are physically as strong as bloodthirsters, ogres, and croxagores. The dwarves can parry blows and or are on par in arm wrestling contests. No. No.
I mean,
no, that's the first hot take.
Sure, you want that for your world, go wild, but
that's the first hot take I'm going to say. Absolutely not.
Like, love it, man, like Pegasus. Love it.
Yeah, like, oh my lord, dude! Like, look at the books where like a bloodthirster swings and freaking like Gotrek gets sent flying across the room. Like, no. Thank you though, Julius. The Oak of Ages is a hive mind nature god. It's the original god of the world. Athalorn is its etheric realm, time flow difference, etc. Spirits are its demons. The Oak of Ages slowly corrupted elves/gods to work for it.
Not so controversial. And the very idea of world spirits of this kind is something that 40k also runs with, particularly if you look into the Exodites and further. So this is not controversial at all, to the point that this is very close to almost certainly what it is. Hive mind, nature, God. It depends on how we use the term God, but hive mind, yes. Nature, yes. God depends on how that term's deployed. But the rest of it, yeah, the elves have indeed been corrupted by whatever it is that's in the spirit. Nathaloran, pardon me. This is, in the greater scheme of things, not that crazy as a setup.
Yeah, when the Wood Elves got back returned in 8th edition, spoiler for anyone who hasn't read it, they literally got turned into a more 40k-ish version of themselves, which isn't unusual and is like not a big deal. I don't think it's bad. And they literally just gave the Warhammer Fantasy planet a world soul known as the Weave.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they did. So that's what this is. Yeah, and that's, sure, great, fun.
And the Weave even matches quite well with the concept of hive as mind. So yeah, totally works.
For me, yeah, there are isolated couple places in the Chaos Waste that are still living and have not affected by the power of chaos due to something that protects it. I don't think that's that controversial. That makes total sense.
In fact, I would say that not only is this not controversial, it's the case.
Yeah, you can actually see an example of this in the Wolfric novel. There's like a big forest that's protected by a horrifying giant tree spirit that they kill during the novel. It's like a tree man on steroids. But the idea that there are certain places that have like minor gods or really powerful spirits that protect them, yeah, great.
Yeah, and good story potential too.
Yeah, and that gives a lot of stories of like, what are all those chaos guys up fighting against in the Chaos Waste? Sometimes they're throwing themselves at these things and dying in hilarious amounts.
There's always something extra. Yeah.
Carrie, 6th Chaos God, counterpart / nemesis to Hashit, the Formless Horror, Katal, Queen of the Abyss, God of Fear on the Primordial Sea, Fisherman Servants, Kraken like Demons. Sure, why not?
Sure, why not? I mean, I'm not sure I'd make it the 6th Chaos God. Much like there's not really a 5th Chaos God. It's just there's the big 4 and a fuck ton of others. It's just another Chaos God. That's how I would generally drop it. And do I think that there is a Chaos God equivalent down in the deeps? Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Sure.
Yep, you could absolutely do that if you wanted. Amadeus, Khorne was once a hound of Hakarti, metaphorically tortured by her experimentation of Dar in the War of Heaven, but he bites Freeze down on the loose. This explains his strange hatred of magic for Chaos Gods.
Okay, so this is not the case. Definitely. Doesn't mean that you can't make a story for this in your own version, but it's not the case because Khorne is there at the beginning of the war. Dar comes after the beginning of the war. Dar is used and basically made by Hecate, using chaos against itself during the Great War against chaos. So this isn't the case. Khorne as well is right at the very beginning and kills Azurin. It's noted in at least one place that he is responsible for killing the great divine creator god during the Great First War against chaos. And Azurin, like a phoenix, returns at a later date back at his pyramid. So that it isn't the case, but it does make for a fun story.
Yeah, I would say what I would pivot this to is I think you could absolutely build a story for something that happened in the War of Heaven where Khorne was cheated by magic. Either by something Zinch did or something that Hakarti did. But like that a god used magic to cheat him of some great victory or harm him in some notable way, and that's why he hates it. Cole Patterson, every major head of state in Warhammer is a moon shapeshifter like the Dragon Empress. She's just the worst at it. Source, Lightdorf Press, 2505. They're all moon men. Everyone that disagrees with me is a moon man. That would be,
love it.
That would absolutely be something he would do. Yeah,
that's actually cool. You're on point.
That's great. Perfect. Necromancer Cobalt, the Eye of the Panther is home to a panther-headed cave of wonders and is ruled by placeholder named Sultan Aladdin, who abuses genies and jinn to maintain his safety, wealth, and power.
Aladdin, huh? So the Eye of the Panther, which is down in Arby, for those of you that don't know, is definitely something that needs a bit more answers. I actually planned to use it in the third part of the Enemy Within campaign to explain why the Knights Panther are the way that they are. Because the Knights Panther famously were founded around Araby during the Great Crusades, which have kind of gone through somewhat of a a change recently over in the old world. But beyond that change, I think using the Eye of the Panther for something is worth doing. It's been kicking around since White Dwarf, what, 300, 200, whichever one it was first dropped in. And it should be used. Could we use it for Aladdin? Yeah, we definitely could. That'd be an interesting way of bringing it in, particularly given what the Cave of Wonders looked like in the cartoon.
Yeah, definitely is.
That was my fault. I didn't mean to do that.
Definitely is something that could be done. And shit, because like the whole thing with like the Knight's Panther and everything, like there's supposed it. When you look at the Eye of the Panther cave, you're like, okay, there's supposed to be a thing here. Where is it? And it's nobody knows. It's just kind of out there somewhere. Yep. Prince Cheddar, the Ogo line Cathaian dragon sibling, defected to Nippon and now serves the nation as a royal advisor in the Ultimate Ninja, a rogue dragon story that doesn't default to chaos. Also, Ninja Dragon.
Yeah,
that is compelling. Last sentence there.
Yeah,
Ninja Dragon.
Ninja Dragon. Thanks, Prince Cheddar. You rock.
Yeah, I will say I very much hard agree that my personal headcanon is that the Shadow Dragon defected to Nippon. Is my personal thing as well. I don't think it rules Nippon, but I think it is a notable ally.
I wouldn't want to have basically the Chinese equivalent ruling Japan equivalent.
What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
There's already enough tensions between real world folks in that direction that we don't want to be exacerbating it into Warhammer 2.
Yep. Brock 6000. The Chaos Gods were created / empowered by the absence of the Elven Gods, who left a power vacuum coming to the material plane, which is what the old ones wanted, and why Ashurin made the gods leave to staunch their power growth.
That is an interesting theory. The idea that the Chaos Gods became empowered because the Elven Gods had arrived in the material plane. It isn't founded in anything, given that we know that when the material gods went into the material, when the gods came into the material realm, it didn't change the fact they were also immaterial at the same point. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't build that into a really cool story. This is one that feels like it's a definite myth. Some people would believe this.
Yeah, I actually could see this being a very interesting myth that some people in the universe would say that's why Ashurin like gave the declaration, and it might not be the case, but it's an interesting thing, and that could be like why that particular character is like, there should be no gods in the material plane. They should all return to the ether, because whenever they're not in the ether, chaos fills in the space. Like chaos is almost like a rot that fills in that vacuum.
Yeah, but given the ether's infinite, it's just a classic example of mortals not understanding how the ether works.
Which is good. Which is good.
I think it's a great myth. I really like it as a myth. I don't like it as an actual metaphysical reality. Also, given that we're sitting at the hour, for all of you who have arrived late, if you want us to pick up your comments about, well, all your headcanons, make sure you at us, whether it's at Lorebeards, if you're on the Lorebeards channel, Loremaster Sotek, or Loremaster Sotek channel, or just at headcanon because you've got a cool one you want to throw at us. Also, we have recently just opened up the new Lorebeards Discord. If you would like to dive in, I presume that Sotek has a comment somewhere where he can bring it up, or just repaste it back into the link so that you can all dive in over there. Yes. People are already chatting like mad over in the new Lorebeards Discord. That place will be changing quite a lot over the course of the next so many weeks, so do make sure you check in frequently. But it's already off and live, as you can see there. If you want to tap in, if you're watching us and you don't want to click on a link, you can tap it in by hand like someone from 1991.
It'll also
no, that's
be
too early.
Like in
1996.
It'll also be in the top comment of the video and everything.
Superb.
Okay, I'm going to grab a couple of these random ones real fast. Medline Preg says, headcanon, AOS, and maybe even fantasy Grimnir is on par with Khorne and martial prowess / fighting power, i.e. Grimnir would rock his world both ways. I think Grimnir being an exceptionally powerful warrior god that is up there with the other warrior gods, sure.
Yeah, I would suggest that the difference between Khorne and Grimnir is that Khorne is an immaterial god and Grimnir is mostly a material god. So they're fighting in different spheres. And I would argue that Grimnir would be fucking terrifying in the material realm in a way that might make Khorne quake. It might make Khorne want to bring more of the immaterial aether into the real world to empower him and make him bigger. But yeah, I think there is definitely something in this, but I would suggest that it's not so much that they're on pars, it's they're differently powerful.
Yeah, I think the idea of them getting to blows with one another is the very difficult part. No, I would see both of them straining at the leash to fight one another, but there are difficult limitations there. Seth, Triton, demigod guy, is a part of Krakenrock the Black's family.
Okay.
And instead of making a deal with Chaos, he instead struck a deal with the ocean.
Okay, that's interesting. So making effectively a deal with Manan or Mathlan or any of the various names you wish to choose for that god. Could you do that? You absolutely could. I mean, that's something you could do. It does suggest, though, Krakenrock is part of a larger species. Triton sort of isn't. It sort of could be, depending on which version you go with. I'd say if you really want to go down that route, you're probably better running with maybe an avatar. Or something much more spiritual, like the ultimate expression of an oceanid, an ocean spirit.
Yeah, Triton's always been really weird because the lore is like, okay, we definitely feel like he's supposed to be a physical entity, but he also is alone, and he's the only one of his kind. So what's the deal with that? And then they kind of never explored it.
Yeah, and it's one of those ones that should just be nailed down and pinned.
Yeah, he's very weird. I would... It's like the ocean is so full of magic. People do not understand how magical the fucking ocean is.
Yeah.
That I think he makes a lot more sense as like an uber divine servant, essentially. But, you know, it is what it is. Okay, back to... Where was I?
Ooh,
here.
This one there.
Pormesia, the 9th Cathayan dragon, could not use the winds of magic, unlike its siblings, but instead bend/use souls as its power.
What, vampire dragon? Is that what you're saying? Can manipulate and suck the souls?
Yeah, he's a great sucker. So what I would say is that the manipulation of souls does fall under certain domains of magic. So that in and of itself kind of creates a contradiction. I'm also not sure what would be the point of having him be like a soul manipulator / bender. Like, I don't understand what that would be implying he's so capable of that makes him unique compared to his 8 siblings, or he or she.
I hard agree, because the manipulation of souls is a core component of magic. This isn't something new. Saying you can't use the winds of magic, but you can, is a bit odd. So I would suggest we'd need to have a slightly different story. Much like saying that hags of Kislev, they manipulate spirits and souls and similar. And they do it using magic, and it is tied directly through to the winds of magic, which they don't necessarily channel, but they manipulate. So I'd suggest that we'd need a different story if you wanted to take this route for the 9th dragon.
Yeah, I will say the idea that it could not use magic at all, and that was like a deep issue that arrived that was unusual and kind of frightening, that could work. Totally. Especially if you go with the idea that it later becomes corrupted by chaos, you could be cooking with some sauce then. Stephen Lucas, Inquisitor Romanov made a 40k theory on the late Horus Heresy and recent Gilliman books. Emperor will become the Dark King, become the roots of the Primordial Annihilator / Great Beast, new Grey Knight lore pointing there, but 40k. Cool. Those were words, many of which I understood, but excellent. Great.
Yeah, sure. I'm not that keen on Primordial Annihilator Great Beasts in general, because they're often so poorly written that they don't have any character or any real worth to the setting. Or worse, they are so wet that they get so many little details that you're left with going, well, it's not a Primordial Annihilator anymore or a Great Beast. So as it currently stands, I would be generally going meh, unless something really good was written for it.
Diamond, on one of the Warhammer maps, the one where the lane is light brown color, that's not very descriptive. There's a dark splooge at the bottom left near a label that says no ships return from here. And in my opinion, yes, we've actually talked about this on the Maelstrom stream.
Yeah, that is the Galleon's graveyard. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, this is not such a controversial point. It's exactly what it is.
Pedro Moncala. Hey guys, big fan of the show. I'd like to know your opinion on a player character. It would be an Estalian follower of Myrmidia who wants to prove that necromancy is a useful tool against chaos to her, and maybe ambition will be his downfall. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Fine. Yeah, go.
That's great.
Go wild.
the best.
If you want to see an idea of how this could manifest, go and play Dragon Age, the most recent one. What was it called again? Veilguard. In Veilguard, there's a necromancer who's a very easy stallion lift and copy paste, and there's all manner of necromancers down there that you could easily use. So play that game, or at least read the lore for them online, and you'll get yourself a really good background that you could use.
Yeah, I will say, I think, with the exception of good old Kimmler, just because I love Kimmler, the best necromancers in fantasy, in my opinion, almost always tend to be people that start off with the most noble of intentions. Like, they genuinely are trying to use necromancy to do the right thing, but they don't realize that it's like playing with a super cancer that attacks your mind and your spirit and your morals, and it wears you down. So the idea... Cancer. Yeah, so the idea that you have a character that is leaning on his faith in Myrmidia to try and keep himself on the straight and narrow while delving into this horror, that's a great character. That's a great character. He has another one here. I have a theory / question. Interpreting that the elven or human gods are just gods, can the classical gods be like Ladriel and be elven gods who go with humans because they see them as better for certain purposes? Or if not, where do they come from? I think this theory makes it work that the X-gods are just gods and at the same time keep the pantheons by race.
I don't think I quite got the question there, Pedro.
So I think what he's asking is that if there's no such thing as elven and human gods, there's just gods. When they're worshipped differently by, so like Mathlan and Manon, is it that the elves that worship Mathlan, the god helps them and uses them for certain goals and fulfillment, but then it relies on humans for other goals and fulfillment. So the god uses the different races for particular goals, and that's why it allows itself to be like interpreted different by different cultures.
Can't interbreed, not races. I can't help myself. Literally can't help myself. But on that, sure. I mean, that would be one way of interpreting what's happening with the different gods and how they're manifesting. It's as a theory goes, it's somewhat unpopular in certain quarters that the elven gods are just the gods, and they are worshipped in lots of different ways in different places, and there's a hierarchy of lesser gods beneath them that the elves just don't even recognize, because the elves, as far as they're concerned, consider them to be basically spirits. Big spirits, like, say, for example, the god Delb, who is the god of the Lake Delb and consumes spirits that fall in the water there. They'd say that's not a god, that's just a big water spirit. And that makes sense. And this would be one way of justifying how the gods work when the different species in the Warhammer world.
Yeah, ultimately, I would say have fun with discovering your own answers and keep and think about things that like humans can manifest, prayers and stuff like that, and miracles, which elves seemingly can't. And why is that? There's no easy answer. That's something you kind of have to discover for yourself.
Yeah.
Brock 6000, the ogre native language can only be properly spoken with a full mouth while eating. Burping for emphasis, but spitting and throwing up is a grave insult. Halflings can learn this language and correct pronunciation easily. That's hilarious.
Hilarious, Brock, and certainly something you could do. It's not something I do with my ogres purely because the largest use that I have for Warhammer is a role-playing game. And as a role-playing game, you want to make everything accessible and fun. And this would make speaking with ogres potentially fun, but because we like to role-play it out, it just get a pain in the neck. You'd constantly go blah, 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 as you attempt to eat, and it would be as you attempt to eat and talk, and it would just be a bit weird. But I do think that possibly using this to a degree, where certain speech is considered high speech or different types of speech when you've got a full mouth or something similar, works really well.
Yeah, I would say if you're dealing with a butcher or a slaughtermaster that is doing like a prayer or is doing like a spell or like giving a sermon of an ogre version of a sermon, that this is the way that they have like sacred speech, or maybe when ogres are like doing really formal forms of speeches for like alliances or marriages or whatever aspect is going on in ogre culture. This could be a really fun way to step that up. And it also would be a hilarious way if you're a GM and your players encounter an ogre for the first time to do this. And when your players go, I don't understand a thing you just said to me, you go, exactly. That is what your characters hear.
Yep.
Donovan, The reason the Lost Isles of Elithis are named this way because they used to be a civilization which was destroyed by past Everchosen. You can either do a human civilization based on Indonesia, the Philippines, or maybe a fourth elf faction who initially refused to return to Ulthuan, who controlled an empire in the southeast of the world and had Mathlan as the primary god.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that would be one way of handling it. I'm not sure what I would do in this particular instance. But the Elithis title sounds very elven in terms of its name, but that doesn't mean that's not the name that it once held. It might have been a different one. This is simply what the elves call it, in the same way that the elves have got their own name for the old world or their own name for the World's Edge Mountains or whatever. So loosely, sure. But I would probably want a lot more development there.
Yeah, so because they're called the Lost Isles of Elithis, it seems to imply that the elves had something there and then it was lost.
Yeah.
You could go with the Everchosen story. That could work. I think I would also probably enjoy doing a thing of maybe the elves tried to take over that space during their colonial eras, but the humans there just beat them.
Yeah, possibly it was an invasion that came afterwards as well. So they were once held by the High Elves. And those islands were then lost as someone else came in. That allows us to have an extant, useful, awesome civilization in the area rather than we're going to create an entire new piece of world building and then just say it got destroyed 4,000 years ago. Meh, less fun than building something that's cool in the present right now that we can deploy in our Warhammer fields.
Let's see. Next up we got Dittoleaf. I believe that in the eastern mountains of Kislev, a small kingdom of dragons has reformed because of the extreme cold reminded them of when they ruled.
You know, there's something in this Dittoleaf. I was fully intent. I don't want to get caught up in this, but there was a point where when I was running Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay that I had crafted a bunch of campaigns, and there was campaign 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first one was enemy, but then the second one was going to be past the old ones. The third one was going to be, it was under the subtitle The Orders, and was going to involve all sorts of awesome. But going over to Kislev was going to be a core component of it, and I was going to be using quite a lot of dragons in that because of this reason, that the dragons had gathered to the far colder climes that had been created by this random weirdness that's going on in Kislev. Kislev is much colder than it should be for where it is in the world. And that was going to be a part of it. So I don't think this idea is crazy. Kingdom is not the word I would use, but gathering certainly makes sense. And even some of them becoming something different. Great frost dragons or some equivalent, because we know the dragons change when they are steeped in a particular type of magic, possibly when it's their eggs, possibly when they grow up, depending on which particular theory you want to go with. But not so crazy. The only thing I'd remove here is Kingdom of Dragons, but lots of dragons. I think it fits. I think makes the dragons happier.
Yeah, when you're dealing with the coldest places in the Warhammer world, that are like especially that are like far away from the predations of chaos. So your Kislev, the mountains of Morn, certain parts of Nagaroth. I think you absolutely should have increased dragon activity.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Dragarui pygmies are Slanesh worshippers. Bespoke and Bobrat are Beesbok and Brobat are aspects of Slanesh. The racist drawings of them are from spiteful old worlders with bruised egos.
Yeah, the best attempt to try and fix the pygmies that most people have gone with is to make them halflings who happen to be black. And again, it's not the best answer. It's not the worst answer. It's much less racist than some attempts I've seen. But pygmies have, in general, just been dropped from the setting. So if you want to do that, Jack Ruby, go wild. But it's probably not what I go with. But the racist drawing, spiteful old worlders, isn't much of a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no. Yeah, I'll simply say, yeah. Pygmies would be one of those things, if I ever was going to do anything from them, I think I would redesign them from the ground up, because I would want them in the Southlands, where it would make sense, instead of South America for some reason. I don't know why they're over there, but okay. Biofoot, the reason the Isles of Elithis, I like how y'all are Elithus. Yeah. Isn't that a chaos guy from Dawn of War? Anyway, are lost is because Teclis misplaced the keys to the Boiling Sea Triangle. Also, AOS should have more demi realms. AOS has a fuck ton of demi realms. It is
Yeah.
so many demi realms. Not all of them are included on like the core rulebook maps and stuff, but like when you actually get into the reading, there are so many sub dimensions and pocket realms in AOS that it's silly. It's silly. Mihal, not enough for HC, but want to help. Zote stream next. Not enough for HC. I don't know what HC is.
I'm missing something, Mihal. Can you just drop into the comments what you mean? I'll watch out for it looking right now.
Yeah, a Zote stream would be fun. I actually think we could have a lot of fun with the Zote stream.
Yeah, Zote's pretty awesome.
Oh, do you want to
Headcanon? Headcanon.
Oh, Headcanon.
HC. I'm an idiot. I should have realized.
Yeah, that would have been smart of us to figure out.
Yeah, really
not that smart, but a little smart. Sadly, we failed.
Seriously, man.
Stolen for the Kislev stream. The Widow was a god of peace/stability who was murdered by Cain, becoming the mythical first murder, creating the Widowmaker, splitting her into 3 forms and dooming the world to constant war.
I mean, interesting one. The Cain story is generally made to be a touch more biblical than this, in that the story of Cain and the first murder, if you want to go down that route, was actually more. Cain and more. And Cain kills his brother more, and he uses a weapon called the Grieve that was created by Vol. We are mixing gods a little bit here. One of the 100 blades that was created by Vol, and that weapon you can find inside the Tome of Salvation for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, and that's generally the one that we go with. So Mor was trapped in the realm of the dead as now the god of the dead because of the business of Cain and what he did as a god of murder. Now, that's generally the story, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't take an entirely different route, for example, going with the Widow. But again, the story isn't that the Widow is dead. The story is that the Widow is a widow and that her husband is dead. So it might be better to say that the Widow was Verena, for example. Verena, who is married to Mor. And Mor got killed, leaving poor Verena, whose heart has now been frozen because of everything that has occurred. That would allow her to be somewhat peaceable and stable if you wish to do so, and you get a very different version of Verena. That's one way you could spin it, but if I was spinning this story, I wouldn't be trying to kill the Widow. I'd be looking to kill someone around the Widow.
Yeah, that for me would be the core thing that we've had several hot takes about the Ancient Widow that have done this, and I'm going to reiterate that the point is that she's supposed to be a widow. So you're supposed to kill her husband or her partner, not her.
Yeah, totally.
Just
bring up this comment here from me, how Cain killed Mor, making a god of the dead instead of just dreams. Yeah. Mor was a god of the future and seeing things in dreams and insight. An aspect that in the Empire is now worshipped generally under the name Forsag. But Forsag and Mor are typically deemed to be the same entity. And Mor then became the god of the dead.
Nerf?
Nerf 7. Nerf 7. Nerf.
Hot take. Listen to the Hell Pit episode, and I see a lot of anti-capitalist /Thatcher thieves in Warhammer. But any critique of socialism in Warhammer from Eastern European point of view? No capitalism, no Warhammer, no lovely universe to discuss.
So there is very little in the words of the critique of socialism in general in Warhammer, because most of Warhammer's core creation was created during a time when the Conservatives were in control in the UK. And the Conservatives were not the most right-wing party in the world, for all the UK like to view them as very right-wing. They were a sort of centre-right party, almost equivalent of the Democrats over in America. But they were our equivalent of the right-wing. And most of the criticisms that were being thrown at them by the students who were writing Warhammer at the time, the ex-students, who were all mostly left-wing, Labour-supporting, socialist types, weren't really criticizing their own beliefs. They were criticizing the things that stood in front of them. So whenever satire got dropped in, it was often pricking at those in power. And you got to remember, from the UK's perspective, the Conservatives had been in power for like 90% of the time up to that point. Labour was the secondary used to, occasionally popped in and did things like gave us the NHS and then vanished again. So the Conservatives were power, which is why they're the ones that got most of the needle pricking. So this doesn't really happen. Later on, as Games Workshop becomes a bigger company, it tends to avoid satire.
Yeah.
It tends to avoid it.
Yeah. I would say this, I think, would be a really good opportunity for if you ever want to like put your own like little story into the setting and use it as a idea to critique a lot of the things that your personal history interweaves with. This would be a good thing to do, especially because Warhammer focuses a lot on like medieval structures, so it's a lot of like monarchies and power systems of like leaders that have like the will of God and all that other stuff. There tends to be very few other systems that get touched on because of the nature of the setting.
The very nature of the setting is conservative. Because it's based on older political structures, most of which were very conservative in nature, meaning that most of the satirical punches that come from the writers are about the very nature of the societies they're writing about. So, yes, sadly, no, because sometimes satire is good, but even in modern writers, just to put one little bit of squirty cream on top of our cake, if we take, for example, in Ubersreich, when we were putting the Ubersreich together, each one of the core Warhammer Fantasy roleplay books at the beginning had opening double-page spreads of pictures, giving you an idea of what the setting was like. And on one side, it was a very jingoistic version of what reality was like. God saves the Emperor, Sigmar is great, all that sort of stuff. And on the other side, it was far more realistic, almost peasant view of, oh my God, this place sucks. And when we were doing the Ubersreich one, in the first draft of it, the jingoistic one quite literally said, because Ubersreich had just been invaded, and part of the justification was to make Ubersreich great again. Because as far as the powers that be are concerned, Ubersreich had fallen and had to be cleansed, and they had just sent troops in to do whatever the fuck they wanted. It sounds somewhat pertinent to today's politics in a variety of ways. That got nixed. And it didn't get nixed by Games Workshop, it got nixed by Cubicle 7 because they didn't want to make a political statement. I, to this day, disagree. I should have fucking kept that one in.
Yeah,
make Ubersreich great again. Because Warhammer has always been about pricking at power and satirizing these things. Sometimes it's difficult to do, and some writers don't have the deft hand, and they end up cacking it up a little bit. But you tend to find, because Warhammer is so conservative in the nature of the models it presents, that equally it's not pricking at socialism, for example.
Christopher Thomas, dwarves are hairy, Skaven are hairy, therefore Skaven and dwarves were roommates. Oh my God, they were roommates.
Hi, Loss.
Proc 6000. Ogres and halflings used to be one being, split by the old ones.
Not controversial at all.
Yeah, I would rephrase that as they have a common ancestor.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that this is a controversial take, Brock, and almost certainly to a degree is true. And the great hunger that lies in the bellies of both species are a uniting factor. That doesn't mean that the halflings worship the maw, for example. The maw is a later creation that comes afterwards. The halflings are not a part of that process. The ogres definitely are. But I don't think this is so controversial.
Grabbing out just some random ones I see. Leo91 says, Zhao Ming is one of the only dragons who's openly bisexual. He's higher in openness and more experimental than the other dragons, which causes conflict. So I would rephrase this a little bit. I don't think the dragons give a shit about whether you're gay or bisexual or any of that stuff. I don't think they care. As long as you're doing your job of producing kids, who cares? What I would say is Zhao Ming, what would cause conflict is that if he openly had genuine relationships and loved his human partners instead of only having them perform their role within a specific caste system. They perform children, but they serve and they're not supposed to get too attached. Zhao Ming is...
I'm being attacked.
Lindsay! Oh, hi, Lindsay!
The world has collapsed behind me. A rent in reality has arrived and someone has come through. It's a demon.
I was in the chat and now I'm in the stream. And now I'm in the chat again.
And now she's run off again. Just as a small side, if you want to see Lindsay, she's going to be chatting at 7 p.m. UK, which is right after this stream. So she's going to be chatting with creator of Aegean, which is a surprisingly brilliant Greek myth game, which combines Greek history with Greek myth. Stu Goff is the writer. She's going to be chatting with him about bringing fantasy and myth into history. which is basically what Warhammer is taking historical things and saying what is fantasy. I'm actually thinking of this stream possibly diving into that one too, purely because it will be a fascinating chat about how we bring myth into that. So that's at 7 p.m. We will hopefully read that.
You don't have to go anywhere because I've already set it all up. So as soon as this stream ends, it'll take you straight in.
So you'll be able to go right after this stream over and have a little watch. That's over on Inside the Rookery afterwards. It's going to be a super fun chat.
Yeah, but anyway, so to get back to this,
we got raided.
Yeah, one of the things that is established in the lore from Total War is that Zhao Ming is seen as very strange and disapproved of by his siblings because he likes to get too close to people, to humans.
Yeah. So I think this is not particularly controversial, Leo. I have no issues with the dragons barely even caring about concepts such as human gender. What difference does it make? They're shapeshifters anyway. I don't think it makes that much difference at all. What does make a difference is harmony and children. So getting the children out of it at the end totally makes sense. Whether you're gay or not, who cares? We've got children to make. It takes a slightly different route to the standard homosexuality is a problem because of church reasons or whatever. No, they've got a quite simple one. Homosexuality isn't a problem. Not having children is a problem, which is a very different route. And I think that the dragons in general, not just Zhao Ming, literally could care two figs. They don't. They're dragons, for fuck's sake.
Lindsay Law in two places. Clearly, she's a demon. Only a demon could do that.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
Explanation. It's the only way. Let's see. Donoman. The reason Lizardmen Specialisaurus use more basic weaponry and tech across the fantasy world also seems to be limited because the old ones put a failsafe into their gates. If they collapse, then magical tech doesn't function properly. The reason that they did this is to stop demons from using super advanced magic tech. Hence why they don't have demonic laser beams, etc. The few magic tech weapons that are across the world have an uphill battle to function.
So, as head takes go, this is almost certainly true in some fashion. Now, it doesn't need to be in the gates. It doesn't need to be a failsafe, but there definitely seems to be some sort of tech limiting factor in the Warhammer world. And the only obvious answer we have for where that would come from would be the old ones. There appears to be something that stops intellect, Heish, if you will, if you want to tie it into the winds of magic. There seems to be a great Heish barrier that stops it taking things to the next level. The Warhammer world is young, 10,000 years old, whatever, but it's also exceedingly old in terms of how long civilization has been spreading. And I do mean much older than our world. Yet its tech is way behind when it started way ahead. Something has gone wrong and it's never been fixed. So as headcanons go, not that much of a stretch.
Yeah, it actually kind of I can't remember the name of it, but there's a book series that I read once. I didn't finish it, but I read like the first book, which the whole concept is like humanity failed on Earth, went to a new planet, and they basically created this super AI satellite that if anyone thinks of an advanced technology, it literally like makes them forget. So if they have like the concept of, oh, I can make something like a chariot, this satellite goes, nope, and they forget about it. And like the whole concept of the book is the machine starting to break down. So people are starting to create and write down technologies.
I'm saying God damn it because that's almost a plot I used.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the book.
I've never read that book though, which is why I say God damn it, I felt so original. But yeah, there's in one of my versions of the Warhammer world, there is indeed a barrier in place, but who made it is not what everyone would expect. Yeah. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
People are saying they think it's a Sanderson book.
Oh, really? There you go.
It might be. I don't know. It's on my shelf somewhere. I don't know which one it is though, because
check it out for later.
It's been like 10 plus years. Felon, thank you for the.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Biofoot, the reason Skroke and Gelt are perfect for each other is down to Gelt being immune to Skroke's diseases and Skroke being vulnerable to Gelt's solid rod. I don't think Gelt's immune to diseases, but okay.
I'm pretty sure Gelt's not immune to diseases, so our theory is beginning to fall apart.
Jack Ruby, the Knights led a coup on old, corrupt Bretonia.
So, Jack Ruby, I think this is definitely speaking to a story that could take place at the founding of Bretonia some 500 years ago, off the top of my head. And there's something happened. The lady stepped forward and intervened. The entirety of Bretonia changed. definitely something occurred. Now, the story that we're given traditionally is just simply, oh, we bound them all together, and all the loose dukedoms have now turned into a big kingdom. Everything is jolly and bright. Where the truth of it is that the lady had been around in Bretonnia for centuries by this point. That's mentioned in more than one place. And had been worshipped by folk, amongst other gods, one presumes, for a very long time. The Bretonii had been there for at least 1,000, if not 2,000 years up to this point. What the fuck were they doing? What was going on there? So there's definitely a story you could build.
There would definitely be a deeper truth behind the 12 great battles of Gilles Le Breton and his companions, where he also tore down the old governmental structure and probably murdered people that didn't agree with what the companions were doing.
Yep. There's definitely a story there that you could tell.
Ricky Chapman, the reason orcs don't turn into orcs from 40k is because the amber wind is drawn to them and suppresses the greenskins' ability to make shootas, but it does result in braver goblins such grots.
Ricky, that's not actually that crazy.
Yeah, that's not the worst idea I've ever read, to be really honest.
Really annoying? I've never considered that one.
Yeah, because the amber wind would be the natural antithesis.
It's a pacifistic, bestial wind. The very nature of the Warhammer world holds them back. Oh, there's something good in that, Ricky. Okay, so as we said at the beginning of the stream, some people are going to drop some stuff that we've never considered. And some of them will just be crazy, and that's why we've never considered them, and we'll just dismiss them out of hand. But every once in a while, someone will say something, they'll go, oh, I've never considered it. This is my first one. This is the first one. Thanks, Ricky. Deeply appreciated. Never considered that before, and it's changed my appreciation of how I can handle greenskins.
That's a really good idea.
That is a good one. Yeah,
that
love
explains
that, Ricky.
a lot about greenskins in a really succinct way.
Love it. Really simple, and it speaks to the Warhammer world and everything that Warhammer world represents. So yeah,
well done. 10 points to Gryffindor. Dumbo, there are no fishmen, but humans are menfish.
Yes, Dumbo, I think you've actually answered it.
Okay. Someone needs to create a crazy guy in the streets of Altdorf who literally just screams at passersby that they're all just fishermen that decided to walk on land one day and they've forgotten their true origins. That humanity are just fishermen that left the ocean. And they should go back. We should go back to the ocean where we belong. That would be a very... I'm going to make that a character. I'm going to name him Biofoot. Mickey Stopwatch. The elves and dwarves follow the typical old one pattern of creation and uplift. They were initially a paired race like the halflings and ogres or the giants and humans of Albion. That's spicy.
Interesting, but they're not very paired. They are so very different to each other. Unlike the halflings and the ogres,
they don't have a connecting thread.
Yeah, who are clearly connecting, and the giants and the Albions are also clearly, and the Albions and the humans are also clearly connected in some fashion. Elves and dwarves just aren't. I would probably look elsewhere for that connection. Gnomes and dwarves, for example, or even gnomes and elves are a better connection.
Gnomes and elves,
yeah. There's definitely something potentially in that, but I probably wouldn't tie elves and dwarves together.
Krimgelto, Searing Doom, Gelt's hiding something. He's a frog. He could be. He could be. I don't, we can't see under that mask. Who knows what's under there? Inquisitor Thomas, humans aren't real. They're all just 3 dwarfs in trench coats. Okay,
if they were, they'd be 15 foot tall.
Yeah, that would be
an average in Warhammer are not actually that short. There's some people who depict them at the same height as halflings, which is around about half the height of a human, but your average dwarf, in truth, sits around about just under the shoulder of a human. They're shorter than humans, but not that short.
Yeah, they're in that, almost, very small dwarfs are very upper 4 foot, but most dwarfs are 5'2", 5'4". They're not that tiny. They're really not.
Yeah, Warhammer dwarves are bigger than dwarves in other settings.
Circuit Gaia, as an additional theory, credits to Dana Howell. One remnant of the old fantasy world in AOS is the 8 points, an echo of Ulthuan, the Great Vortex. That's very spicy. And I don't
sure hate it. It means nothing to me.
Oh man, I don't even know how. Oh god,
let's not spend too much time on it. We have a lot to get through.
We don't have time to explain that, but stay tuned. All I can say is stay tuned.
Okay, that's one that if we're going to stay tuned in it, then let's do that. Mark it down as something to do for what? Age of Sigmar? Are we going to end up doing about Age of Sigmar? Do you think we're going to do that?
Who could say? I bet if you look at the Discord, you wouldn't see anything AOS related. Of course not. And if you did, I wonder what that could mean.
Yeah, I have no idea. No.
I'm writing that down.
Let's move on like that.
Okay, thank you. Time Pirate, less serious take. The Lady of the Lake is not an elf god. Ushoran is just so insane that he created a new god in the ether that became the Lady. That is why nothing she does in the end times makes sense. That's like,
I mean, that's it. We've explained the lady.
Yeah, I like how instead of just saying the lady's insane, he's like, no, she is a delusion of the Mortark of delusion from AOS that backports itself into fantasy and is completely fucking insane. Sure, Time Pirate, you are indeed pirating the time waves with that theory. That's funny. Dynaman, the second battle of Blackfire Pass occurred in the first millennium of the Empire and was part of a major war between the Empire and the Riemann Empire, which at that point controlled all of Talea, Stalia, the border princes, and northern Badlands. Both sides also supported various tribe leaders who solidified their positions over tribes and became the various duchies and dukedoms.
So I would not do this because the battles of Blackfire Pass against Greenskins. And that's what they're against. We could do that story, would make complete sense. But again, if we did that story, it's unlikely that Blackfire Pass would be the primary route of invasion. In fact, if anyone was going to be invading anyone, it's Bretonnia that would be taken out. Because Bretonnia is a far easier route through the Estalian and Tilian corridors up there into Bretonnia. Bretonnia is the next most obvious route, and then it'd be across the Grey Mountains that your Riemann equivalent would be making their attack from into Reichland.
I would rather have it that there was. A very popular thing a lot of people are wanting that GW will probably never do, but we're going to keep throwing it out there in the hopes that someone will eventually make it a canon, is that there is a Greek equivalent in Warhammer, which is the ancient border princes, and the idea that they had spats with the early empire and that there were human conflicts in Blackfire Pass. Great. I have no problem with that.
Totally great. Yeah.
Andy's 100% right. It wouldn't be called the Second Battle of Blackfire Pass because it has to be orcs or greenskins.
Yeah, totally. Greenskins.
Hoggodly, my biggest head case is that the Hobgoblin Khanate should be gunpowder using greenskins. They're shown to be willing to trade to extent with the Chaos Wars and such could trade with other. So between those two major gunpowder factions, there should be some cultural bleed through the Hobgoblin Khanate. That could work.
Yep, very well. Talk. I think that's a stretch that's not much of a stretch. And if I was updating it, I would seriously consider doing that. And then almost certainly have an argument against Workshop would say, but it didn't say that anywhere. And I'd be like, yeah, but come on.
Yeah, it would actually make the Hobgoblin Khanate uniquely dangerous.
Unique and interesting. Yeah, totally.
And would explain like how they can absolutely fucking devastate Chaos Hordes if they have gunpowder. Man like Pegasus, Loremaster of Sotek, hot take. Beastmen are a problematic, simplified racial stereotype of Native American culture, something that is often ignored. Now, that is a incredibly hot take. So I would say that I disagree. I do not think there is much overlap, in my opinion, between actual Native American culture and the Beastmen. I will say that if you're talking about the old stereotype from like the Peter Pan cartoon movie, where the Native Americans are shown as mostly naked people dancing around a big stone or a big bonfire or a big tent in the center of their little campment, and they're all like hooting and hollering and they're scalping the white man and all that stuff. Yeah, there may be some, you could argue there's some strong similarities there, but I don't think that's representative of actual Native American culture.
I agree. I would say this is too American-centric in many respects. UK pitching of anyone that's not from the UK.
You did say stereotype, to be fair. You did say stereotype.
Yeah, indeed. Because from the UK, this isn't the stereotype. It's anyone that wasn't born in the UK falls into this loose area back in the British Empire. Oh, of course, European people are fine, but we go into Africa, we go into India, we go into China, we go into Americas. They're all just primitive people waiting to be properly civilized by what we think is right. Absolute bullshit. And the way that they pitched all of these other cultures as somehow primitive is really simplified racial stereotypes, and the Beastmen are that. They just are. You're correct. Worse, though, is not the Beastmen, it's the Greenskins. The Greenskins have this much worse, to the point that they actually use Native American tribal parts for their feathers, for our forest goblins, our primitive orcs being in exactly the same place. They are bad, man. If you're going to be updating any because they need to be fixed because they're just bad stereotypical lifts of how people perceive Native American cultures, it would be, let's change what they've done with the greenskins.
Yeah, there is especially when you look at older stuff, it gets less bad the later you go.
Yeah.
But it's definitely one
Savage
of those things.
orcs.
Yeah. Yeah, Savage Orcs.
Even the name Savage, it's really bad.
Yeah, it's why, well, to be frank, it's why like the old world, they're not called Savage Orcs anymore. They're, I forget what they're called now, but I think they're called like Wild Orcs or Frenzied Orcs or something.
Or whatever, yeah. I mean, it's a bad name.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that they could have addressed in a like they could have addressed it a much easier way if they had said, okay, let's sit down and actually publish a book that really delves into what greenskins are, explores them as this strange mushroom species, and really gets into the thick of it. But instead, GW is like, no, we're just not going to touch anything, which makes it worse because then you have to rely on older material, and the older material is not subtle about where the inspirations came from.
Yeah, totally. And your version of how to view, say, for example, the Beastmen, it's not the example I would have used, but you're right. Any culture that is considered to be primitive is often viewed through the lens of old colonial views. And they were very prevalent in writing from the 80s and the 90s because of just the education levels at that time. And then as later writers have come on, they've either tried to fix it, rarely, or they've just ignored it, leaving the old racial stereotypes in place. So when someone like Total War comes along and goes, how do we adapt this? They are left with a racial stereotype to adapt and the choice of whether they adapt it or not. And they did with, say, for example, the Savage Orcs. They are not great. They're slightly embarrassing, actually.
Alafluck, Itzel's first draft was of humanity was Beastmen, who had a firmer hold on magic but more prone to mutation, meaning they're better at healing to ether. They're not evil, just prone to Akshian after the genocide's Dar.
So there's definitely something potentially in that, but standing firm against that are the Druids of Albion, where the Druids of Albion are fucking capable of almost all magic. Really, really, really capable of all magic, to the point that the elves look a little bit less special. And they were not particularly prone to mutation. So you could argue that the Druids were given extra stuff after the Beastmen experiment, for example. But the general story of the Warhammer world is the Beastmen happened during the Cataclysm. They were not created by the old ones. And we would retell the story and change their myths if you did this.
I will say that there is something I think you could tweak here of like, why do the Beastmen think that horns is the greatest sign of like position and power within their culture? And the idea that it could somehow tie back to the old one that's known as the tri-horned beast, that maybe there's something there. I'd have to think on it, but the idea that like, I mean, if Rig was like this weird old one that was off making some bizarre species that she wasn't supposed to with the Amazons, and you kind of had like the halfling and the ogres were a very last second species, if you had the idea that there were some beastmen that were made on purpose, but their purpose was then lost and greatly distorted, you could make that work. It would require a lot of effort, but you could make it work.
It would. And yeah, you could definitely make it work.
Acting Zebra, in addition to the household chores, these streams are great to have on while working out. Nothing like sweating the Lorebeards. Hollow Earth beyond demons. There are demons in the depths of the earth. That's just fact.
Yeah.
There are.
Yeah, the number of stories of effectively the things that lie below in this cave or something equivalent. Now, whether that's because there is something down there, or whether that's just simply an easier way to represent how to create rifts into the aether, sure. But yeah, there's all sorts of horrors down there.
The Predator Rule 75, Chaos Gods / Elf Gods, not all the gods. Example, Gork and Mork. I don't know what this is in reference to.
So Chaos Gods plus Elven Gods are not all the gods, because there's also Gork and Mork.
No, that's just a fact.
That is a fact, and if we go with what is almost certainly the case, Gork and Mork are external deities to the Warhammer world that arrived along with the orcs.
Yeah, they're literally alien gods.
Yeah, they're alien gods that don't come from the Warhammer world, so they're not a part of the, at least as we understand it, the plan that the old ones are putting into place.
Surrogate Gaia, Kugoth's personality change between fantasy and 40k is deliberate. He just feels miserable in the 40k setting.
I'd be miserable if I was in 40k.
That is the funniest hot take I think I've seen today. The idea that Kugoth, when he manifests in 40k, is like, oh, this place is just a bummer. This place just sucks and it makes me sad. It's very relatable and very funny. Inquisitor Thomas, Hags of Kislev can't use magic at all. They're just really talented at sleight of hand. That is
no.
Yeah. The answer is no.
Sure, but no.
It would. I will say you could have a woman that exists somewhere who has convinced people she is a hag, and maybe she's just very good at sleight of hand, which could be very hilarious as a roleplay scenario where you have this crazy old lady who's basically like an expert thief and illusionist, not in the magical sense, but like in the trade sense, and is basically just an overhyped magician. That would be very funny for a character a party has to deal with. But you know.
Yeah, particularly when you look at the circles of the, I forget what I not called them. Not the hags, the wise women circles, and how the vast majority of them can't do magic. Very few of them are cursed with magic as they perceive it, and then become hags. Part of their very nature, becoming hags, becoming these wizened old creatures because of what the magic and the spirits demand of them, means that it's unlikely. It's just there's no magic involved. I mean, why did they become hags? How have they become these wizened old horrible women?
Parisia, screaming godchild, been imprisoned by the chaos god because he emits magic without getting damaged, like a black hole. This scared them and they imprisoned him. I'm not sure what you mean by emits magic without getting damaged.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean either. So let's just say, sure, sounds great.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I understood this one properly. Feel free to clarify in the comments. We'll be on the lookout for it.
Yeah.
Several Wallace, thanks for becoming a member. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Lovely.
Rocker Boy Jukebox. My theory is that Ladriel saw what Sigmar did for his tribes and the rise for godhood and went, hey, that gives me an idea.
I'm not convinced that there is any clever idea to gain from what Sigmar did with his tribes. And the rise for godhood that came afterwards. She's already a god. So there's nothing to learn from there. And the empire being bound together didn't last. It collapses. And the whole thing collapses. So I'm not sure that there's enough there to inspire Ladriel. Something else appears to be the inspiration, if you will.
Oh, that the screaming godchild absorbs magic like he absorbs everything around him like a black hole, and that's why they imprisoned him. That could work if you really wanted to make him do something. Sure. I think he was just made up by somebody, and then everyone kind of forgot about it, and that's the end.
The end.
But if you wanted to make him like a greater threat, making him something that literally just devours everything around him, whether he means to or not, yeah, sure, you can do that. Let's see. Boop. Not a headcanon, but in my opinion, there needs to be an exploration of how the various cultures of Warhammer deal with non-chaos mutations, including both those caused by magic and those with regular disabilities. I'd imagine some cultures would be overly ableist as superstitious, but a cool subversion would be others that are much more supportive because they have to know a lot about disabilities so they can determine who does and doesn't have chaos mutations.
Okay, so first, the Warhammer world doesn't make that distinction, and it's made clear in multiple places. And it's made worse. Over the course of time, Games Workshop has made mutation a worse and worse and worse outcome. To begin with, in the original Warhammer world, mutation was just frowned upon. It was something that people looked at, and they were effectively mutationists. They didn't like racists. They didn't like people who had mutations, but they existed within the Warhammer world. Many of them lived beneath society. They were treated like second-class citizens. Your average beggar on the street might have a mutation and wasn't drummed up by some witch hunter or crazy Sigmarite or equivalent. They were just second-class citizens. This was dropped into the literature as well. For example, the Vagar Brugel, a very famous dwarf, someone with dwarfism, not an actual dwarf, inside the Genevieve novels. And he lived in this horrible half space where he was on one side not a dwarf, so had no one to obviously have friends with who were on the dwarf side, and amongst the humans was deemed to be a mutant, although he wasn't. So That then leaves the uncomfortable question of, is there ableism all over the place in Warhammer? And the answer is yes, it's horrible. And somebody either needs to change that or they need to write it out clearly, because at the moment, no one's willing to do it. But not disability in particular being an issue. For example, you have a hand cut off. If you are basically in a position where parts of you are removed, that's fine. But if you're born with something different, the Warhammer world says that's a mutation and you're screwed. And that is just uncomfortable in so many ways. And I don't think has been particularly well explored. And it's grown worse. If we go from the first edition, it would have been fine. If somebody was born with purple hair or something like that, they would have just gone, yeah, he's a weirdo. He'll now be the village idiot or something like that. He wouldn't be killed. He wouldn't be marked out as being tainted or anything like that. They just go, oh, I'm not so sure about that guy. Some people wouldn't care. Other people would. In the current version of Warhammer, he would almost certainly be murdered by someone. It's really, really ableist, and it's really, really kind of broken in that regard. I didn't tackle this when we did the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay core book. It was a discussion behind the scenes, and it was decided to be tackled in the trappings book, where we were going to be discussing basically all of the trappings that you have to deal with things like having a cut off limb or anything else. And there was going to be a section about ableism and how it expresses differently in different parts of the Empire. We weren't going to get rid of it. Some of them were going to be ableist in the same way that some people are racist or speciesist or whatever. There's all manner of bigotry in the Warhammer world, but we were specifically going to mark it out as not the standard. But that has never happened, which means as it currently stands, the standard is if you get born and your hand didn't form correctly in the womb, you come out, they think you're a mutant, and that is uncomfortable.
Yeah, and it's kind of extra weird because there are explicitly certain blessings and spells that can detect mutation.
Yeah.
So like there are systems that exist within the setting itself where like if
but
someone,
they're rare.
But they're rare.
That's the way the setting was made. Most people don't have access to any way of determining what's a good mutation and what's a bad mutation, if you wish to view it in such stark and uncomfortable terms. Meaning that the average peasant in the village literally has no way of knowing of who's chaos tainted by the way that the world has been described as these people are chaos tainted. Effectively, anyone who's born looking different gets thrown into the woods for the beastmen, and it's just a bit meh.
Yeah, and it's very weirdly contradictory too, because like in the Black Library books, they will have tons and tons and tons and tons of side characters that have various deformities.
Yeah,
and it's just like, yeah, that dude just has a clubfoot or whatever, who cares? And it's like, okay, but according to like the army book, that guy would have been like thrown in the nearest forest. So it's inconsistent and weird.
It's inconsistent, weird, and uncomfortable, and it just needs someone to sit down and disambiguate it. It's not a difficult subject to tackle, but I think it's an important one to tackle.
Yep. Should be Age of Myrmidia says the Ancient Widow is a pretty old one creature who survived, and ice magic is magic from before the opening of the gates. Kislev is a biome reflecting old malice created / sustained by the Widow.
Just my own little question here, just to make sure I'm right here. Is malice actually the name of the world? Or is malice the name of the thing that was left after the world blew up?
So technically, malice is the name of the core of the Warhammer world. So like the metal sphere at the core.
Yeah, it really bugs me because I'm pretty certain the Warhammer world is not called Malice.
Yeah,
but I reckon if people on the internet keep on saying it is, that the new books will start reflecting it because new writers will just reflect what everybody says.
Yeah, but I was going to say, but there has started to be bleed over where you have an example where like Bellicor in Total War Warhammer 3 calls the Warhammer world Malice.
There we go. Bleed over.
In one of his dialogues.
That's what I thought. Because I remember having the discussion
planet
with Games Workshop, and at the time when I was discussing, they said it expressly is not Malice. You have to call it the Warhammer world. I was told to call it the Warhammer world. That was just 6 years ago. They said it's not Malice. Malice is what was left after the Warhammer world blew up.
Yeah, that's right.
And it would be easy to call it the core, but even that's not correctly correct because the whole thing kind of blew up.
Yeah, and that's... For anyone curious, that's why in Age of Sigmar, when they talk about the Warhammer Fantasy planet, they always say the world that was.
Yeah,
world
exactly.
That was. When they're
because
talking
it's not
about
called Malice, yeah.
When they're talking about the core that's made of Sigmarite, which is what they named it, which is a stupid name, but whatever. That's Malice.
So
it's
world
just
that
all-
was when you're talking, and we had to refer to it as the Warhammer world. And I had the discussion because I asked, could I call it Erd? Because Erd from the Empire's perspective. And they said yes, but no. And the yes was, that's what they probably call it. No, because we've never called it that anywhere. And I was like, okay, I just won't refer to it then. Because it'd been called Erd repeatedly in various other
Erd
places.
would make
And
so much more sense. That would be
because,
such a more natural name
it's
for the
just Earth.
planet.
Okay, and it's called Erd. But that would be the Empire's perspective of its name. Obviously, it was called the Fated Place, translated from Eltharine, for example. In Eltharine, it's the Fated Place, and not Malice in the slightest. So, sorry for taking a slight divergence here, but I don't think it's called Malice, but I think it will be called Malice before this decade is out.
Yep. As for your concept about the widow, that's a fun idea. I think you could definitely run with that.
Yeah, you could definitely run with that.
Because she doesn't operate like standard gods. She's different than a lot of the other gods you see interacting with humanity and such. Warrington Crescent. Ogres are just meat mechs for halflings. The gut plays the entry hatch. Hilarious and kind of gross. The halfling just knocks on it and it opens up.
And I go.
Ricardo Andre, my take, the Sisters of Twilight are Malekith's daughters, and Ariel keeps it a secret due to Marathi killing Alisara, just to add to Malekith and the Elves' tragedy. That's spicy.
Not only is that spicy, that is my take. That is exactly my take.
Super spicy.
My take, 100%, that they are his daughters with his wife, who is now dead. Because they clearly had a relationship and they almost certainly had children. And Malekith almost certainly has other children elsewhere too, because he's an elf.
Yeah,
elves get about, man. Elves get about.
Yeah, that would be that's pretty good.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
I love it, Ricardo. I love it so much that I actually already believe this myself. I believe they're from the House of Anarian.
Yeah, man, that would actually explain a lot of things about them. In a lot of ways.
I mean, it's just a sweet match. I really like it.
Because the Rin stuff is weird. It's weird. We'll do a stream of them at some point. Because I love the Sisters of Twilight. Ashion Loman, hot take. The old world will explain the lost races that existed on Manslib and Morslib and the ancient wars that happened that left them desolate. That I think that's a door that definitely exists that GW that's been opened and GW might choose to explore it. For anyone that doesn't know, GW has long operated on what's known as open door writing. I think that's the technical name for it, which is basically that when you write your lore, you just throw in random shit. And if it ends up being interesting, you can go, oh, well, then we'll explore that thing. And it's literally just writers throwing stupid garbage at the wall to see what gets attention, which is why if you look at a Warhammer map, they have like all of these places notated and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. What is that? And the answer is it's nothing because they haven't written about it yet. That's one of those doors that they haven't opened yet.
That's fair.
But this wouldn't surprise. I mean, the Moon Empress, it does feel like a natural next step. Inquisitor Thomas, Kane is actually a cab driver in Los Angeles. That would explain why he's so murderous. It would explain a lot.
Vampire the Masquerade.
Balmora, I would love a Gaelic inspired
Gaelic is an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. Inspired subfaction within Bretonia. Albion related peoples living within Bretonia's forest / outskirts of Athol Loren.
Well,
male wizards,
male
wizards, conflicting social structure, forest spirits, monstrous units, etc.
So, Balmora, go read the Frontalier hedge witches that you'll find over on the LAWhammer Patreon. It's for free. You've got a document up there that's around about 15 pages, something like that, with a bunch of spells, a bunch of backgrounds, and it's this. It's this. So clearly, I kind of agree with you, and as does Saurus, who was the inspiration behind everything in that as we put that together.
Yeah, one of the big bugbears I have with Bretonia is a very big place. There should be a lot more diversity and weird things going on in it.
So much more going on.
It shouldn't just be knights and peasants. There should be a lot more things happening.
Yep.
Donoman on Nerf 7's comment, while there isn't satire of socialism per se, there is a little bit of like references to authoritarian regimes further east. Both Cathay and Kislev have secret police, and Cathay especially has elements of population control, conformity, and everyone in Cathay is living a totally great life and doesn't suffer at all. Please ignore the peasants.
Yeah, but there's no real satire. It doesn't really exist. Generally, it just tends to be porting over of certain ideas that they have. I like, take for example, the rather poor rendition of the Chekist that were dropped inside and kind of dropped later in Kislev with their secret police, and the way they were dropped. It kind of got dropped later because they didn't like it and they felt it was too uncomfortable. So no.
Yeah, because for those that in Realms of the Ice Queen, there is a literal Chekist secret police that's like the really scary kind. When they got updated for Total War, people. They basically got adapted into the Akshina, which are not the same thing. There are similarities, but they weren't willing to commit to the full bit.
Yeah. And the lack of commitment and also the lack of satire means that just look at how Cathay is pitched in its first book. They're just nothing but good guys. There's nothing going on there that suggests
terrible. Unless you like deliberately read it as propaganda. And then you're like, okay, this is a great propaganda piece, but that's clearly not the intent. It's not good writing, in my opinion.
No, agreed.
Dolly. Games Workshop, if you read all of the books they publish nowadays, they are much less and less and less. What's the word I'm looking for? They're less critical reading. Yeah, and they're more
political.
They're more, we have good guy and bad guy. Please pick.
Yeah, black and white.
And it's disappointing. Dolly, ogres worship natural disasters. The Maw is basically a big sinkhole. The Everwinter and AOS is a big blizzard. If they wanted to expand, the Maelstrom is there, and they could make a tornado god. So the ogres worshiping natural disasters, I would rephrase that to the ogres witnessing devastating natural events and interpreting that in religious ways, I think is very fitting for them as a culture. Where the Maw is a literal horrible meteor strike. They worship the Firemouth, which is the biggest volcano they've ever seen. The idea that they would worship perhaps the living blizzards of the Mountains of Morn, or see them as a type of god, and like tornadoes and hurricanes, I think that 100% tracks for them as a culture, and would be a fun way to expand on them. And that the ogres view destruction as deeply, deeply symbolic and impressive because it's scary, and they are big bullies. They are used to being the biggest, baddest thing around. When something just is able to flagrantly destroy them, they respect that as a dominant power. And I think that works very well for them as a cultural group.
Yeah, I agree. I think it works very well, but I also don't think that it's a core component of how the setting currently uses.
I don't think that's how the Warhammer Fantasy Ogres, as they're currently pitched, operate.
Yeah, agreed.
Darius Rose, if it wasn't for an elder race, humans in terms of tech/endeavors is utterly mediocre. Even orcs and ogres are shown to build empires with no help. Nehakara would disagree with this very, very heavily.
I'm not quite sure what he's saying here.
He's saying that if it wasn't for like dwarves and elves and stuff helping humanity, that humanity has no impressive endeavors or technology. They need help from some other force.
Yeah, if that's the case, then Nehakara stands as a clear example of that not being the case. Although you could argue, isn't that just the elven gods?
Yeah, I'm gonna stay off my pulpit on that particular one today. Carrie, End Time / Storm of Chaos headcanon. Replace Archaon's generic lieutenants with Tarmakon, his brothers resurrected for the end of days. Would have been fun.
Yeah, there could have been something in that. Although I'm often, I don't like reusing stories like that when you could create something cool and new. But the generic lieutenants are not something I prefer.
Yeah, I think that Archaon's lieutenants should have, in my opinion, Archaon's lieutenants for each of the four powers should have been established characters that people, and there should have been much more of a storyline about the various characters of each of the gods fighting one another, trying to claim that position. And that should have been a lot of the prequel storyline that leads up to the start of the end times, instead of it just being like, Archaon's here, and he looks at the crowd and says, you're my lieutenants now, go forth. I don't like that. That's why I hated the Glotkin so much. The Glotkin just appears
out of nowhere.
out of nowhere and is like, oh, look, there's the big Nurgle champion. It's like, well, that's stupid. It should have been someone that was already established. But that's just my opinion. Singemeister, hot take. The CA redesign of the Crocsgores is both more inventive and fitting than the theme of the original GW design. I know what you're doing. You don't actually believe that because that would be a terrible opinion. You're just saying that to piss me off. I'm not falling for your tricks.
I think he's obviously completely right. Singemeister, spot on.
I hate those stupid fat alligators. Biofoot78, looking to start an AOS Path to Glory League in the Lorebeards Discord for those that are interested. I'm in. Genuinely, I've been wanting to get back into it. I will be in. So if anyone wants to learn to play Age of Sigmar, we will be organizing an Age of Sigmar Path to Glory League on the Lorebeards Discord for anyone that wants to play.
So go join up. The link is in the comments somewhere. I don't think it's in the video description yet. Do you want to post the link again just to make sure they've got it?
I will
just
post
make
it
sure it's brought down.
Once more.
There you go. You got the link one more time. Do go join in our Discord. We've got channels open now for a variety of fun, exciting, Lorebeardy topics.
Yeah, the only thing you'll need to play with us is Tabletop Simulator. So long as you have TTS, which is a very cheap game that has an incredible amount of value because it has like every board game you've ever heard of on it, then feel free to join us. And Biofoot is going to be in charge of organizing it, not me.
Yay!
Super Unlock. My big headcanon is that Khorne used to be Baelor before being somehow enslaved or otherwise broken by the old ones. The Famir didn't know that he had changed when they made their deal and were damned.
Interesting idea, although the point where Baelor somehow enslaved, otherwise broken by the old ones, and that being Khorne, does not appear to be the case. Khorne was whispering away from the sidelines to various entities across the Warhammer world at that point. And then the gates fell, Khorne comes, and it all goes tits up. And it doesn't appear to be he was chained or collapsed in. He just man-babied his way across the planet, killing everything in his path, including lots of other, one presumes, gods. So that doesn't seem to be the case. But could you tie the two of them together? Yeah, sure. But that's probably not a headcanon I'd use.
Yep, I hard agree with all that. All right, so let's see. Singemeister. Skinks equal little lizard guys. Saurus equals dinosaur guys. Crocsgore equals Saurus but lanky. And an army of on-the-nose names, Crocodile and Crocsgore makes sense. Just because.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right.
Here's the thing. Look at an actual, in real life skink. Now look at a Warhammer skink. They don't look the same. A Saurus is not a real world critter. And if you compare a Saurus to a dinosaur, they don't look the same. So fuck your stupid, the Crocsgores have to look like crocodiles logic, because it's not a Crocogore, it's a Croxagore. It's not a crocodile, man. It's not what it means.
I'm 100% with you, Singemeister.
God. Anyway, Singemeister. Today's redesigns of Razordons and Salamanders are worse, turning interesting Harryhausen retro style dinosaurs into Slurposaur monitor lizards. Actually, what I would say to this is one of the changes GW made that was, I think, a little disappointing is go look at a 6th edition Salamander and compare it to what CA had to use, which was the 7th edition Salamander. The 6th edition was way more interesting, where they have these huge back spines. Not spines, but sail. They have these big back sails.
The crests in the back.
Which were meant to, like, how they regulated their body temperature when they were creating this, like, big amount of heat and this big acid that they would then, like, vomit at you. I much prefer the new Age of Sigmar Salamander, which are called Spawn of Sotek, which I actually think is very cute as a name and very fitting. CA kind of got stuck with a not great design. And the Razordon and Salamanders that Games Workshop initially designed were meant to look very similar. They were built on very similar model concepts, so they looked very similar. And Total War kind of repeated that, where you can tell there's a lot of similarities, which I think is to the detriment, because they should be very different species. A Razordon should be incredibly different looking in, like, size, physiology and all that stuff compared, like, salamanders should have those really, really big sails and like big frills and things that are meant to cool their bodies off and help regulate their temperature, whereas razordons are, should just be completely thickly covered with spikes and all that stuff, and have like big club tails and everything. But unfortunately, it was kind of like, it's one of those situations where there was a limitation of the model design, and when CA decided to model them, they based it much more focused on the actual minis, which they didn't do for the Croc scores for some fucking reason, or the Quaddle for some fucking reason. That stupid beak. But anyway, yeah, I loosely agree.
Wow.
Darius Rose. Grease's gold tooth destroys all Primarchs physically. Code. He's strength 10. He's strength 10. He would body like a Primarch.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure it's as crazy as it sounds. He's pretty tough as old Greases.
Yeah. Now, granted, if they're going to be a little baby coward and they're going to hide in the back of the battlefield and pew 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 him from a distance, but that's not how Primarchs fight. Primarchs get in, get their hands dirty, and that would be a stupid move against Greases. I'll say it. The Scepter of the Titans, you're dead. Fuck you. You're not surviving that shit. Azarias, when the Emperor of Mankind rose from the Golden Throne and realized that the fight was hopeless, his last great act was to split the power of the warp into 8 wins to limit/fracture chaos. TLDR 40K is a prequel to Warhammer Fantasy.
That is an interesting take. In terms of the setting and everything that it offers, it could be a prequel. It could be. But you would expect something more concerning the Emperor in Warhammer if that was the case. Something that the Emperor had become. Something that the Emperor manifested and represented as.
I would say this could work well if you're running with some other people that had hot takes earlier this stream about making the fantasy and 40K universes. They're the chaos, the ether aspects are simultaneous in a way, even though they're separate realities, where the winds of magic exist in both settings and are shattered into 8 distinct winds in both settings. But whereas in fantasy, it was caused by the destruction of the polar gates and how the ether.
But it wasn't.
But it wasn't. But
because they were there before.
It distinctly wasn't. But somewhere says it was.
But it was.
Yeah, but you could argue that maybe the gates being created is what separates the 8 winds, and they somehow still function in some way, and they're destroyed form. But the Emperor doing it, I'll simply say, if you want there to be Warhammer magic in 40K, this would be a fun way to have it exist and involve the Emperor in a way that would reinforce what the Emperor means to 40K.
Yeah, it would also perhaps speak to all of the soul-bounded psychers and what part of that process was, and their ability to use psychic energies are somehow reprocessed through 8 winds. And there are examples of that in the 40K setting. If you go to the earlier versions, particularly as I've said before in other streams, if you go back to say how Space Hulk in its first edition represented psychic powers, and they were broken down like winds of magic. But it's a lot of rewriting of the current setting to make it even come
not
close.
The case now.
Yeah, it definitely isn't the case now.
Ace McGinley asks, could a fully equipped Lizardman character like Krokar with full Old One tech, like his gauntlet, so his full body is in that. So you're proposing if you took Krokar and made him a dreadnought in Old One tech, could he have beaten the Emperor?
No. No. Let's be blunt. The Emperor is beyond plot armor. He can crack a Titan with his mind. I don't care what you're fucking wearing. You're dead. The Emperor at his peak writing, when he's physical, is quite capable of handling any of that bullshit. It takes all 4 Chaos Gods to fucking hold him back. No is the answer. But you could definitely write a story where the unique combination of Old One artifacts somehow meant that the Emperor couldn't affect him, with a blade that somehow messes with reality, with armor that somehow holds off against psychic levels stupid, with all manner of cool potential individual artifacts. So basically you're saying, can I create a character that can kill the Emperor? And the answer is always yes, because you can make shit up. But if you just go with what each of these things represented in each setting, the answer is so heavily no that it's almost farcical. The answer is no. It's the Emperor.
Yeah, I'm not going to weigh in on this. Well, I'll simply say that a writer could do whatever a writer wants. That's the easy answer. A 40 now the idea. I know the Emperor apparently was almost killed once by some orc, and I can't remember if Horus or Gil. I think it's Horus that saves him. But like the idea that he almost got crumped by a war boss seems to suggest there are particular things that there could be a series of events that leads to him getting the shit kicked out of him by somebody, but I don't know what that series of events is.
No.
And for our upcoming 40K Lorebeards, this should be a great question you should ask on an episode.
Go ask them. They might come up with a different answer.
Yeah. Y'all should ask them if you were going to craft.
Well, no, that wasn't the one I went to pull up. That story always feels weird to me. It really does. It's not a good story.
Yeah, well, because it flies in the face of everything else that's written about him. Where
totally.
like if he could legitimately be potentially killed by an orc in like a one-on-one fight, then he's not nearly as powerful as everything else suggests that he is.
Yeah, totally. He isn't.
Let's see. Dynaman. Okay, Sotek, you joke about the guy yelling about the fisherman. It's not a million miles away from the fisherman idea Ashby and the others have been working on. Basically, they think that all animals that left the oceans and their descendants are traitors. All animals that have since returned to the ocean, like turtles and whales, are both traitors and invaders. Hilarious.
Yeah, screw those guys.
That's great. I love the idea that the fishermen view all land life as traitors for leaving them behind in the seas. That's very funny to me, actually. Apostates! Stephen Lucas, expand on not enough hish to tech idea rather than the old ones. 7 other winds suppress higher thought process in addition to messing with machines.
No, the 7 other winds don't do that. There's only really one wind that suppresses intelligence, really, and that's rather appropriately for our earlier discussion, Gur. But Heish completely balances that off by bringing intelligence. So it's a neutral point. This isn't a situation where the 8 winds of magic mean that tech doesn't work. That's not how it works. They're all in balance with each other in what they do to the world. So the answer for this one is not really. We'd need to create a different story.
Yeah, I think that the Gur thing we were talking about earlier works really well for the greenskins specifically.
Bloody does.
Not necessarily the entire setting.
Yeah.
All is dust. There's a chaos god of death that was the warden of the realm of chaos. The cataclysm happened when the 4 chaos gods killed it by throwing its body into the material realm, which then took on the form of warpstone, the energies of which are why undead are so prevalent.
I'm sure. That sounds like an actual myth. This sounds like something that could definitely be mythologized, and some people would believe it. Do I think this is the case? Nah, but I think it makes for a great myth.
I don't think this is the case, like Andy said, but I love this as a theory for like some people that worship Nagash, positing why Nagash became a god because he consumed so much warpstone, which is actually the body of a dead god.
Oh yeah,
that would be great. That would be super.
Yeah, that sounds spot on. Holy shitballs.
Actually, Quinn, Morgan Bernhardt is Franz Lohner, and Wolfram Grudgebringer is his heirloom, and he has an Vermintide too, and says he had a paymaster who leers Dietrich. FL. Oh, Franz Lohner is an alias and says his true name has power. I have more too. And then we lost him.
So, actually, Quinn, the answer to this is no. That doesn't mean that you can't make this the answer.
I think it's yes.
It's a super popular theory, but the reason the answer is no is because I've spoken to the people involved, and the answer is no. Directly, no. So much so that when we pitched Franz Lohner over into Ubersreich, very clearly made that not the case, because he just wasn't. Morgan Bernhardt looks nothing like Franz Lohner, a completely different character, and era-wise, to become Franz Lohner, we'd have to shorten himself, we'd have to broaden himself, we'd have to get a different hair color, we'd have to get a different facial structure, we'd have to be a completely different guy.
Clearly,
we'd also
the
have to lower rank in terms of his entire voice, where his voice moves from being a noble to not being a noble anymore.
all alterations through his magical process when he left the job as Imperial Spy Master to call Franz. He had to go through a magical Two-Face process.
Sure. But the entire thing makes for a great fan theory. And it's a fan theory that many people believe. And when we were doing the thing and discussing it with the folks behind the scenes, it was, this isn't the case. Don't even think about making it the case situation. So the answer to this one is no, but as a fan theory, it's great. But it's one that if you look at all the facts, doesn't make any sense at all. Because the facts don't add up. But that doesn't mean that you can't say all those facts are wrong. Those facts are bullshit. And why? Because magic? There we go, we're done.
Honestly, I mean, that's the best thing about Warhammer is someone can go, well, that doesn't make sense. And you can look at them and completely serious go, magic? I don't care about your facts.
So true.
No, Beastmen based on the ancient giant Irish elk Megaloceros would be the supreme of their kind, given they had 11.5 foot antlers. Fuck me, that's a big beastie.
Megafauna. They're huge.
I would say a notably terrifying species of beastmen that's perhaps found in Albion. That would be kick-ass. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Stephen Lucas, want to include ER Crucible spells to Gur. I don't know what ER is. Tangle knots of horn are a sign of primacy. A spiral tree
to reach the heavens. Someone's gonna. It's Elden Ring.
Elden Ring.
Fuck me.
So Elden Ring Crucible spells to Gur. Yeah, we're struggling with today.
Thanks very much for the clarification there. That's Elden Ring from Oregano and Dragon Magic there. So I'll be honest, Gur is somewhat lacking in a lot of its flavor, so it wouldn't be too hard to bring in a lot of those ideas.
Yeah, they're very. Some of the Winds of Magic are less popular than others, and could definitely use some heavy.
And Gur is one of the worst examined, where others have been much more examined.
Cousin Ockery is Gotrek. Hilarious, but Cousin Ockery, Vermintide. Cousin Ockery is a character that gets talked about.
I haven't played enough Vermintide. That's why I don't know.
Where Bard's always like, my Cousin Ockery did this really ridiculous, overpowered thing. Like he almost sounds like a Gotrek because his feats are so ridiculous. But Cousin Ockery actually showed up in a recent event, and sadly, he is not Gotrek.
I'm amused by Lindsay's question. Is Drachenfels an ancient perpetual from 40k who went mad? So, for those of you who don't know, perpetuals in 40k are effectively immortal, can't be killed, unless, of course, they are. And Drachenfels, for those of you who don't know, is an ancient human from pre-arrival of the Old Ones times who somehow manages to exist all the way through to the end times, where eventually he gets wrapped up with all the rest of that nonsense. But the answer to this is objectively no, because Drachenfels as a character is also in Dark Future. This is a little known fact. He, as a character, is over in the real world, in an alternative future of the real world, which means he could have gone into 40k. Which means he could have been a perpetual in 40k. The answer is possibly yes. Because Dark Future has a character called, I'm going to pronounce it really badly, Nguyen Seth, who is Drachenfels. And that means he's in part of the real world architecture, and so is 40k, which means the answer is actually he could be. There we go. That was a long way round of saying no, but yes.
Yep. Godric the Grafted. In an End Times rewrite, Cathay gets involved because the third gate was locked by the Old Ones with the key Archaon needs, and they gave it to Shenyang to protect. I assume you mean Shenyang.
Yes.
Yeah. Shenyang is a city in Grand Cathay. So the third gate was locked by the Old Ones with the key Archaon needs. So having Grand Cathay very heavily involved would obviously be a must. I think you'd be more likely to have a storyline where Grand Cathay, Archaon has Grand Cathay attacked by a very massive other force that is designed to keep Cathay distracted so that they don't come to the help of the Empire, which they are starting to do in the Great War Against Chaos, which is a thing. So because they've done that before, Archaon would, I think, very much be interested in looking for ways to distract Grand Cathay. Me and Andy, of course, if you go back and watch our earlier Cathay Lorebeard streams, have posited some ideas of what there might be some horrible, sinister truths going on in Grand Cathay that are revealed, which could cause end-time shenanigans. But I wouldn't involve Grand Cathay in the storyline of the Chaos Portal under Middenheim. I wouldn't have them involved in that, other than maybe one of the Dragon Kids ends up being part of the Council of Incarnates that tries to stop Archaon and is there for the big final battle. Lindsay, but Dark Future is the prequel to 40K, so he absolutely is.
It's not. It's an alternate timeline. I want it to be, though. You could make it. It is. I'm just answering man like Pex. Oh, sorry. Is Lindsay also a writer? Yeah, she was a writer in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Yes, she is. Charles C.K. The Empire is the simplified / modern concept. Many of the provinces are realms in their own right, and in terms of wider history, they've ultimately been apart more / longer than they have been united.
Correct. I mean, that's just correct. That's not even a headcanon. That's just absolutely correct.
In the old world, the Empire is not a thing.
It doesn't exist, and I'm rather disappointed with the old world for how much they try to make it a thing.
Yeah, like it shouldn't be called that, really, because it's not there is no emperor. There isn't an emperor. And there hasn't
there's
been.
3, or there's 4, or there's 8.
Yeah. Like I understand unifying them in a book for the sake of rules and simplicity, but the book should have made it a very, very apparent that it's not a unified empire, and it hasn't been for hundreds and hundreds of years. And
true fact.
The idea of calling it an empire is like ancient history at this point. Mad GT123. AOS Savage Orcs are now called discontinued orcs. Well, so they're not called Savage Orcs. They're called oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, it just left my brain. Holy shit. Oh, I hate when that happens. They have a different type of...
Have you joined the Lorebeard server yet? Just asking. Have you joined the Lorebeard server?
Who?
Man like Pegasus. Have you joined? Okay, because if you have, I would suggest looking Lindsay up over there.
Yeah. Bone Splitters. They're called Bone Splitters.
Bone Splitters. There we go.
Yeah, and they're not currently playable in AOS, but they still exist in AOS. I actually just read the most recent Auric Warclans book, and it very explicitly talks about the Bone Splitters and actually writes a narrative thing of that the Bone Splitters seem to be building up to something. So I don't think they've been like retconned out. I think they've merely the range has been removed, but I think they're going to get their own unique model range, personally. Mr. Samurai Guy 689. I have always thought that the difference between Bretonia,
Bretonia with everyone called Bert.
Bretonia and the Empire comes down to elven and dwarf influences on each nation. What do you think? That's a very common and very easy way to explain a lot of the differences between them. The Empire was very heavily influenced by dwarfs, though there's more elven influence than people realize in parts of the Empire, mostly due to the Lorelorn elves, and also that a lot of the coastal line of the Empire was founded or built on ancient elven cities, much like you see down in the Southern Realms. But Bretonia is obscenely influenced by elven culture.
Yeah, the answer to this is it's not a bad way of looking at them, but it's not a good way to define them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Because it's certainly the case, but it's not their defining features.
Bones. Tomb King saw dwarfs and pygmies as blessed people like ancient Egypt. Maybe they had special positions, perhaps exclusive within Nehekaran courts, and even worshipped a dwarf / pygmy deity.
Certainly a take.
So this would not work in the written canon because pygmies are not in the Southlands. They're in Lustria, which they shouldn't be, but they're on a different continent, so that would not work because they shouldn't be there. But the idea... One of the biggest holes in the setting that drives me crazy, and GW still hasn't addressed it, is that there should be a long, storied history between the dwarfs and the Nehekarans.
Yeah, like a long one. And the idea of constantly referring to humans as some recent species. It's genuinely
stupid.
contradictory the second they added the Tomb Kings to the setting. Now, the Tomb Kings weren't a part of the setting at one point, and the dwarves were entirely correct in saying that they were an elder species, and the humans were a younger one that had much later civilizations. But they changed the setting when they added the Tomb Kings in. And when they added the Tomb Kings in, they went, oh yeah, there was humans all the way back then with their own civilization doing their own thing, and they've got records all the way back to pretty much the Cataclysm. Suddenly, a ton of writing was completely invalidated. And no one at Games Workshop really noticed what they'd done. So they continued having dwarves and elves refer to humans as some sort of new, recent, modern innovation, a short-lived species that had absolutely no long history in the old world. It's a bit of a nonsense.
Yeah, GW has a really bad habit of whenever they update an edition, the mass majority of the lore is copy-pasted. And then they've added stuff, and they've never gone back to look at the stuff they like to copy paste and go, does this still make sense? Because some of it is yes, but a lot of it is no. And they just refuse. Yeah, and they refuse to update it because they'd have to like do work or something. But all that to say, Bones, I don't care. I have no sympathy for Games Workshop. I have they have billions of dollars. They could pay someone to do something. Anyway,
funny.
Bones, what I'll say here though, the idea that dwarfs would have unique positions within certain Tomb King cities, Nehakaran, because they wouldn't be Tomb Kings at the time, cities, and that there would be like maybe an appreciation of aspects of the ancestor gods, or like some aspects of ancestor worship would have come from dwarf culture into Nehakaran culture, which would make sense considering how obsessive Nehakarans are about their ancestors and tombs and everything. The idea that they bury their dead in stone is a very dwarf-like concept. So, like, the idea that there would have been a lot of interaction and cultural bleed between them is great.
In mountains as well, that they make themselves held inside. I mean, there's obvious places where we could have cultural bleed there. And yeah, it just doesn't exist at the moment.
Yep, it's a hole in the setting.
Yep.
Cool Patterson, running with the Sisters of Twilight being the daughters of Malekith. I've wondered for a while now, what was up with the sisters' clear Ashuran symbolism? Almost like they're the daughter of the guy who's the son of the Avatar of Asuran.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons why I plugged it in and went, that's definitely a thing for me. Because it makes sense. It just makes sense. There's nothing else that else can be said. It's spot on. It just fits together really beautifully.
Woo onion. Nope, it's woo onion.
Onion.
Yeah, something like that. Woonion. Yeah, there we go. Ulrich was a corn demon that the Chorfs had captured and tried to convert, mimicking Be'lakor's methods. They failed and made a god that infringed on Korn's domain. Ulrich tribes worship Day Ulrich.
So, that's not the case, demonstrably for Ulrich, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be the case. For example, the Teutogan tribe, which is the core Ulrich worshipping tribe, came across the World's Edge Mountains like, as I recall, how was it described? Like blood from a fresh wound spilling down the side of the World's Edge Mountains. They were a chaos tribe. So the idea that a group that follows Ulrich being a chaos tribe, doing much what the Gospodars did when the Gospodars came across the World's Edge Mountain and settled, the Teutogans did the same, and they settled in modern-day Middenheim and surrounding lands. But the idea is that they met Ulrich there, rather than they took Ulrich with them. And that's when they became Ulrich-facing. So you could build a story that Ulrich went with them rather than met them there. And you could say that he was somehow attached to all of these ones. The Chorfs even are in that part of the world for when they came across. I mean, it all sort of could potentially added up. But no, it's not the case.
Yeah, I would say you might have an easier time trying to build a story that Ulrich was a greater demon or somehow associate, like a demon prince or something of Khorne that abandoned Khorne.
Yeah. I mean, most of Khorne's stories are kill chaos. I hate chaos. No one else, all the other gods don't believe that chaos is coming. I'm telling you, chaos is coming. Evernacht is my way of resolving this. We're going to bring winter down so that when the chaos come down from the north, they hit the snows, and I will murder them. He has been so anti-chaos pretty much from day one, while the rest of the gods were swanning around going, well, who cares? My name's Tal. I don't have any problems at all. It looks like, I mean, Ulrich is literally written into the setting as being around during the Cataclysm and kicking living shit out of chaos. So the story is almost certainly not this, but you could build one if you wanted to.
Mihal says, listen to me out on this one. A giant Zote guarding Nippon that uses magic. I love this idea, but I think the spirit of Nippon as a giant Godzilla is better. I think it would make it, there would almost surely be very magically charged forests on Nippon. Therefore, I would have no issue with there being Zotes that live in Nippon.
Yeah, I think there should be Zotes in Nippon.
I would not make the Godzilla thing, which should definitely be in the setting, a Zote. I would have it be its own unique entity.
Agreed.
Let's see. The 9th Cathay Dragon is the Koho. Well, I suppose I can't disprove that. That seems like a bit of a stretch, but I suppose.
I mean, going for the anti-magic route.
Man, I'm here to present something of a truce on the Crocsword debate. There will be no truces. There will only be death. This is a hill that there is no mercy, only death. While I personally do quite like the CA design, I will say the 8th edition Crocsword models do have somewhat crocodilian features. Their snouts are slightly narrow versus Saurus. As such, I think they look a bit like some of the more terrestrial extinct relatives of crocodiles that have somewhat more boxy heads. So CA could have based their design more on extinct animals. True. Now, I will say, the Crocsword debate ultimately was solved by Age of Sigmar, because Age of Sigmar literally came in and said, oh, there are two kinds of Crocsagors. There are the spawn of Sotek Crocsagors, which have elongated snouts and are more crocodilian. And then you have classic Crocsagors, which have the more boxy snouts that are more stout. I love both of them because they're now separate, and I didn't lose my favorite one, but now I've been given an additional flavor of cake to enjoy without losing my original flavor of cake. And I wish CA had done that, though CA didn't know that was going to be a thing at the time because it hadn't happened yet. Luigi Super, I'm Spanish, and I have an idea of a fan-made Australia. Though I don't think Andy'd like it because I changed the Australian cult of Vermidia a lot.
Okay. Sure. Go wild.
I don't know if you know this. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Me and Andy don't like a lot of things, but we don't actually get to decide what's in Warhammer. It's true. Totally I know it's hard to believe. It's true. We have no control over what's in Warhammer.
Yeah.
At least right now. Mr. Samurai Guy 689. So, Luigi Super, I would love to see you write that up and share it with us. We'd love to see it.
Go for it. Go slap it in the new Discord channel where there's links inside the comments so you can go join us too.
Mr. Samurai Guy, who would win a free-for-all, all the human nations, who's the strongest, who is the weakest? Cathay would absolutely kick the shit out of the other ones.
Cathay would body everyone unless Ind is described in a way that we don't expect. I think Nippon... I mean, if you put them all together, Nippon might have some weird chance as well, but as it looks at the moment, Cathay will body everyone.
Yeah, the weakest, if you count them as a nation, Border Princes are by far the weakest.
Yeah, Border Princes.
Jorgen A. Bjornisen, the dwarf Gunnar from Dragon Slayer, is the best Slayer. That is an opinion.
Headcanons go, you go for it.
Yeah, I can't argue with an opinion. That is your truth. That is your truth.
You go with that.
Darius Rose, Donoman, my boy. Anomalakaris can be a chthonic entity feared by fishermen and every vertebrate on the planet since he likely hunted the first vertebrae. He could have a shadow vertebrate, not vertebrae. He could have a shadow in the warp thing. I will say, if the Nippon Godzilla had like a Tyranid-esque shadow in the warp, that would be fucking hilarious and terrifying in equal measure. It
doesn't make the same difference because they don't use the warp or the aether to cast their spells. It doesn't make almost any difference because the Warhammer world is so very different to 40k. It's one of the reasons why the Winds of Magic are so different in terms of how they're used in Warhammer. 40k and Warhammer are massively different in terms of the way that the warp interacts with real space.
Yeah, I think if you made it where it was such a powerful entity that kind of like how Godzilla absorbs radiation, it absorbed magic. and had like very high match resistance.
That totally on point.
Yeah, where it like absorbs magic and then shoots it out as a breath attack, and it makes it very hard to deal with because it just eats spells and then shoots them back at you. That would be
much better. Yeah.
Darius Rose, to Up to Stare, Bring Me to Life plays as he comes. Who? I like when y'all use super chats to have discussions amongst yourselves. That's a very we appreciate it because money, but like that's just a very funny way to do that. Prince Chatter, the Great Unclean One under Ketza was converted into / birthed the first Vermin Lord Corruptor, tearing out of his guts like a xenomorph chestburster. Gross.
I am not generally a fan of taking greater demons of one power and giving them to another, but in this case, you could definitely build a good story out of that.
Yeah, I would love an idea of the first Vermin Lord Corruptor there being a myth about how under Ketza they found that he's not technically a Great Unclean One. He's more of like an other. You could call him a Great Unclean One. He's on the same power scale. Yeah. And the idea that he was like imprisoned and couldn't move, and a bunch of rats started feeding on him, and the rats started to change, and that's like a myth the Skaven tell about the first corruptors. That works really fun. There's a fun story there.
And there is.
Adam Russo, they could reset the fantasy universe by explaining that the Dragon Emperor's ultimate plan was to go back in time and change history, creating a separate timeline that becomes the old world timeline. GW doesn't hate themselves that much, would be my answer to that.
Now, GW, rather than they just rewrite, and they just keep everything. They claim it's all one thing, even though they're constantly adding and rewriting.
Yeah, remember, Games Workshop is not Marvel or DC Comics, right? They don't feel the need to explain why something has changed. They just do it and expect you to get over it.
Yep, totally.
Which is, depending on how you feel, is a good thing or a bad thing.
Also true.
Wait, you aren't James Workshop? Me and Andy do not have a percentage of the money needed to claim to be James Workshop, unfortunately for both of us.
So true. so poor.
Hammond, I am James Workshop. That would
so do more super chats, Hammond, if you're James Workshop. I'm expecting $100 super chats from this point onwards.
We know you've got the pocket change.
James.
RuPaul's the best slayer because he slays.
Totally true.
Honestly, there is an underrepresented NPC character for the roleplay game that is a slayer in drag who is like absolutely insanely powerful. That would be
giant heels.
Man. That would be a hysterical character.
Yeah, he just slays.
And he just slays. Like he's just unstoppable. That would be hysterical. Stupid. I would love that character. Dino Man, I feel like Librarius' position as the main part of Nehekaran culture on the East Coast isn't emphasized enough. Also, it's kind of odd how the Lawmians / Librarius Nehekarans are treated the same as the other Nehekaran realms when they're on the other side of the world's edge mountains. Yep. There are so if you go read Court of the Serpent Queen, go check a Felix book. The author tries to address this, where the author talks a lot about how spends a lot of time building how the eastern side of Nehekara is actually very distinct culturally from the western side because they have the mountains separating them. They developed a lot of things differently. And they have a lot of like different takes and understandings of things, which is cool. But this is something Andy and me have waxed, Andy especially, has waxed so lyrical on that we could talk you all to death with it, is that GW treats every faction as a monolith, which does not make sense.
Yeah.
And it's because they're building around a tabletop army game. They're not coming at it from a world building angle, which is unfortunate.
So true. Yeah, it's so true. But they're using it correctly for what they're building. So this isn't a criticism at what they're doing for what they are producing. Successful. It's a criticism for just the Warhammer world as a whole, where they tend to treat everything as a monolith, break complicated cultures into very simple things, and end up accidentally making super racist and weird setups that are just odd. And we don't need to wax lyrical about this one because I've done it too many times.
Yeah. Jorgen A, you're both James Workshop in my heart. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or an insult, to be honest.
Jorgen, I just wish I had the money of being James Workshop.
Me too.
That
Me
would
too.
be awesome.
Hey man, long Drew Paul Slayer pirates. Yep. They're pirates. Okay. We're caught up on those, so I can just start grabbing random ones. Swedish
Excellent.
loops. Do the Dark Elves venerate any of the Kadai? Yes. I'm particularly curious about Laleia. Yes. I remember something about Laleia taking pity on the Dark Elves and shielding them during a sundering, but I can't remember where I heard this. The Dark Elf rune for Laleith is also stylized hand grasping the moon, which just happens to be the symbol of Nagaroz. It's just a coincidence. No. I like yes. All of the gods have a place. Some of them are emphasized more, some are emphasized less. The army books do a really big disservice to the elves where they're like, the high elves like the Kadai and no one else. And they go, the dark elves like the Kitharai and no one else. That's not how it works.
And then they go and contradict themselves again and again by saying things like, oh yeah, they're going to war. Everyone, nods to Cain. And you're like, wait a minute, but that doesn't make sense with everything else that you're saying. And they pretty much do that as a standard for all the elven gods. The elven pantheon is a part of elf culture, no matter what type of elf you are. And they have more relevance depending upon what sort of elf you are. Take a look at the mandala. It includes all of their core gods. It doesn't leave any out. They're all there. They're all part of the pantheon that is a part of elven existence. So the answer to your question is yes, we're done.
Men like Pegasus. Hot take. Bloodletters being hunched and less muscular does not fit the aesthetics for themes of Khorne. In my opinion, it fits more in line with Nurgle's Saint. I disagree. Khorne is not about muscle. This is a 40K-ism. The Space Marines are big, hunking, ridiculous muscle boys. And so the Khornate ones are made into absolute fucking beefcakes because they're all berserkers. But Khornate demons are about lethality. They're about carnage in its most fundamental form. And I would say if you look at nature, the most apex predators are more lean, hunched over muscles where they're needed builds. They're not gigantic, swollen guys that can't reach their back because their muscles are too big to actually get anything behind them anymore.
Also, look at their bloody miniatures. They're covered in fucking muscle.
Yeah, they're very muscular.
The only ones that aren't are the ones from Warhammer 3rd edition, where they were really spindly, weird, lizardine-looking creatures. So from the old Realms of Chaos. But from pretty much that point onwards, even the ones that are kind of hunched up and relatively modern,
they're still swollen with muscle.
Well swollen in comparison to your average chap. So I would suggest that they're nowhere near as weak looking as you're spinning there.
Yeah, they don't look like bodybuilders, but bodybuilders are not like, that's not efficient muscle use.
Yeah, totally.
It's for show, not for strength.
And Khorne isn't about show, really. Khorne is about function. Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows. Khorne cares about who looks best in the gym.
Donoman, hot take about Bloodthirster. While the new design does look cool, I think they look a bit generic. While the older design has much of a... I miss the dog head. I'm going to be honest. I really miss the dog-headed Bloodthirsters.
Yeah, I miss the variety more than anything else. And I kind of agree with you. I don't think it's a particularly hot take. The more hound aspect of much of Khorne has not necessarily been lost. It's just not often repeated at the moment.
Yeah, the kit should have come with different head options.
Yeah,
the fact that
5 or 6.
Yeah, the kit, the only difference in the head options is that their horns are a little different. But one of the head options should have been like a big hound dog-headed version with like fur and shit. Because that would have been my preference. I love the big hound heads. Let's see.
Where are we off to next?
I'm just looking for one that grabs me out here. Katie, what you got for us? Why Cathay fell in the end times, glorious Imperial Nippon decided it was time to stop being isolationist and expand, oblivious of the end times. Also, end and what's their name saw a week in South Cathay and said yummy free resources. So I don't think I would necessarily paint it as Nippon is ignorant of the end times, but the idea that you should have countries are still doing selfish things, humans are still doing human things.
Humans are human.
Yeah, and instead of being like, we should unify against the end of the world, they're like, oh, fuck you, I've got mine. That's a very realistic thing.
Our biggest council of light equivalents. When everyone gets together and says, how are we going to stop this end times? What the fuck are the Cathayans and the Nipponese? And they should all be part of this conversation. And we can't say, oh no, it's just a little Western theater and these things are happening elsewhere. No, they've got elves involved. They can do all manner of shit. They got fucking lizard men involved at some points. They can teleport anywhere in the world. The end time story is purely we resolve the core factions that we currently have. We ignore the rest of the world. This is potentially one way to fix it by saying, oh, the rest of the world were too busy bickering. But I think it is a really weird story to spin given the Warhammer world as a whole.
Crumb Gruzzler. Oh man, that was good. Thank God for those R's. Are there warrior priests of Cain among humans?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there are. They tend not to be warrior priests as you'd understand them going to battle covered in armor. They tend to be just murderers. Murderer priests would be a better way of putting it, because that's generally how they appear.
Can a dwarf woman be a slayer and still wear a dress? If she wants to, she absolutely can.
If she wants to wear a dress, sure, but why would you wear a dress? They are not the best things to wear when you're at battle. And dwarves are practical. They wouldn't be wanting to do that. Why would they even consider doing that? That doesn't make a great deal of sense.
Lupusem says, my personal hot take has always been the Great Horned Rat is actually the chaos god of theft. Every gift he gives the Skaven is stolen. He cannot create anything for himself, and that's why he's so furious about any Skaven being stolen from him.
That's an interesting hot take, but it doesn't appear to be the nature of the Skaven as a whole, who are constantly creating random bullshit. Whether that is creating new species out of other species and combining them together into a hodgepodge mad creation, Frankensteining themselves into something new, or alternatively creating new tech, some of which is genuinely new. Absolutely crazy new devices that use rats and warpstone and magic in a variety of very strange ways. So I don't think that's a fair representation of the whole of what the Horned Rat offers.
I think that is
aspects. Sure.
I think that is a very good in-universe belief by certain factions.
I definitely think that'd be the case. Yeah.
Like I can absolutely see like the dwarfs calling the Great Horned Rat the god of theft, and that he's a skeeving, nasty little thief that builds nothing of value and takes everything from better races and civilizations.
Yeah, totally. It's very much an external view rather than an actual view of the god. It's the sort of thing that people outside might say.
Cabal says, we talk a lot about Yin Yin as a fail daughter, but Li Dao should be just as much of a fail son for the exact opposite reasons. Yin Yin is too yin coded and Li Dao is too yang. I think that works really well. Like Li Dao has a fucking temper. He has a horrible temper. And it causes him a lot of grief, and he's also immensely jealous and angry at his siblings. Whereas Yin Yin is more of Yin Yin seeks glory in her parents' approval and makes interesting mistakes. I do think there's something to that. I do think there's absolutely something to that. Darius Rose, Space Marines should always be males since to reflect the super insecure / closeted and super toxic elements of masculinity. I know it's a 40k take. Well, we didn't say you couldn't have 40k takes.
So I obviously, on my side, have a lot of problems with Space Marines only being male, and it has literally nothing to do with anything other than it biologically makes no sense. The story that they've spun, it makes zero sense. And Chaos wouldn't give a flying fuck. They would be just creating Marines out of wherever the fuck came their way because they're fucking Chaos. You wouldn't know if there was a woman or a man originally in any of those Space Marine suits. You literally couldn't tell because they have been changed. And the whole story is absolutely nonsensical. It just doesn't add up. However, that's funny.
Yeah, what I will say is I think that's fine. I agree with Andy of that. My issue is that the setting hand waves a really important discussion and refuses to deal with it. Of that, if it was a cultural thing, that would make sense. Of like, oh, there's certain chapters or there's certain legions that are like, nope, we're male only, we're a fraternity. I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But like Chaos, it all comes down to Chaos. Chaos wouldn't fucking care.
Yeah, they wouldn't care. Only men shall receive my seed. Are you not aware of the Empire of Man? Does that mean that there's only men in the Empire of Man? Their argument falls apart.
Well, except the Emperor actually seems to enforce that particular idea. Let's see. Mechanical Beanstalk. Hello. Just saying hi. Let's see.
And yes, we are wrapping up in about 3-4 minutes, so we have very little time left.
Gotrek and Grumberdal are the strongest mortal warriors in the entire setting. Also, Grumberdal would stomp Malekith.
I disagree highly.
We have talked about Grumberdal and Malekith. Go watch our Grumberdal stream where we talk a lot about this particular matchup and how it should have gone down.
Yeah, but they are definitely the highest plot armored. Grumberdal very likely has died multiple times and would fit within the core nature of his character too, which would be fine. But with Grumberdal stomp Malekith, that's like a whole story. It depends on what the story is. But are Grumberdal and Gotrek the strongest mortal warriors in the setting? No, they're not.
So
they're fine.
What I will say is that Gotrek is the emperor of fantasy, and that his plot armor is so
because the
mighty.
Emperor is written as being so mighty, where Gotrek somehow survives every time.
Oh yeah,
he's not that mighty.
Plus, the Emperor actually died and Gotrek didn't. So Gotrek actually has a higher feat. But,
he's got plot armor rather than necessarily being written as the most capable. If he took a bullet to the head, he'd be dead. The Emperor would not be.
Yeah, Gotrek. If you read the Gotrek and Felix stories, he canonically has things done to him that the author will note should kill him, and they just don't.
The doom.
And then he gets up and he's stronger than he was before. Like I love Gotrek. I love him.
Proper plot armor. I mean, he literally does. And it's marked in as he's protected by a god. In many respects, it's unfair to call him mortal because he's been set up to be Grimner, a god.
And just anything that could kill him, it won't, because the setting will not allow him to die.
Because the authors won't, because they make too much money.
Yeah. The question, Thomas, so much of the problem with 40K is that it doesn't have the equivalent of Chaos Warriors. You can't rise up from your station in Chaos. You need to be a child soldier to be important in Chaos. Ooh, that's spicy. Not wrong. It's spicy. That's not wrong.
I don't want to get into long conversations about Chaos and 40K.
Yeah, we only have a minute left.
Because I'll go off in one.
Mihal, a lot of things almost kill Gotrek, but canonically, nothing can. Because
you could say that about any character who hasn't actually died yet. Okay, that's a weird way of putting it. I would say that Gotrek's just not that much. It's just he happens to have survived. He's gone through. He's got his doom, and because he survives, he becomes effectively a god because he managed to get all the way through that. It's not because he's immortal. It's not because he's the best warrior. It's because he's never met anything that's yet to kill him. That's not the same thing. If we go into the hypothetical what-ifs, he will get killed again and again and again and again by many creatures. In Warhammer, it's just that never happened.
Yeah, Felix always gets in the way until he gets AOS, and then he doesn't need Felix anymore. Hammond, Gotrek doesn't have blood armor. It's future AOS Gotrek since time doesn't exist in the ether. Well,
isn't that the plot armor?
I guess that would be the plot armor. Part 2 win. I don't know. One day in the future.
That was a surprisingly fun one. That went down really nicely, I think.
Yeah, that was super fun. We hope you all enjoyed yourselves.
Because I know
we gotta go.
Yeah, we got to go. So I'm just going to go a quick thank you. If you hang on, you will be ported over to Rookery Publications, where we'll be discussing bringing your myths into real-world games. And that's almost what Warhammer does, where it takes real-world stuff and it adds myths and fantasy to it. So we're going to be discussing that with the creator of Aegean, which is going to be super cool.
Yep. All right. I'm going to send y'all all off here kind of manually and such. And we will see you guys later. Be sure to join the Discord. I post the links. I'll have the links at the top of the comment. We'll also have it around the various other Discords as well. And we hope to see you guys around. Please take care.
We'll see you in Discord. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, wait. I gotta rate on Twitch before it.
Before you go on Twitch, just goes, I can't be bothered.
Yeah, sorry. Twitch, I have to do it live or else it doesn't count. Rookery Publications. Yeah, hold on. All right, I'll start sending y'all off manually because that's just easy. Bye-bye. There's 1. Then I'm going to switch over to the
It's quite
Lorebeards
fun.
account. I'm going to go to live streams. I'm going to go to the control room, send them off. There's 2. And then Twitch, there's 3.